Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel and welcome to my Omnibus series. I've got so many of these omnibuses that are going to come out so that you'll be able to listen to an hour's worth of stories, which I know you're going to love. You know, the thing is that telling stories is such a fine art, and it's something that was practiced hundreds of years ago when people didn't have the technology that we have today. And everyone would gather around the fire and listen to a wonderful story. And also, what is so wonderful about a story is that personally, I think it is the best way to go to sleep. Every night when I go to bed, I always listen to stories. And that's something that parents used to do with their children. It's something that they still do with their children. There's nothing better than a good story. And so I hope you're going to enjoy this series. And before we start, I just want to say, do subscribe to my channel because you don't want to miss out on anything. Because I'm in for the long haul and I want to make sure that you get the most stunning stories to go to bed with at night or to listen to when you want to be one of those people sitting beside the fire and listening. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and let's get started. I hope you're going to enjoy the omnibus.
Dear Sarah, and all your lovely listeners, I'd been married to my husband James for over 10 years, so I knew him like the back of my hand. Well, so I thought. But over the last 3 months he'd become increasingly on edge, deep in thought, wrapped up in a faraway world. It seemed like our marriage had taken a hard beating, as my brooding husband was so preoccupied that I hardly got a word in edgeways. He seemed so distracted all the time, as if his conscient mind was otherwise engaged. I might as well have been a fly on the wall, as that was how little attention he directed at me. I didn't take it personally. I knew it wasn't about me. My husband was insanely busy, assiduously hard at work. I had discerned his behaviour to be a little out of character recently. I'd seen how stressed he appeared. His brown eyes looked so haunted, highlighted by the dark circles that announced that sleep had eluded him for quite a while. I assumed he was exhausted, being overstretched by his boss, Marcus Sutcliffe, as even after working hours he was tapping away incessantly at his mobile phone, claiming he was communicating with clients after hours, which seemed nonsensical. Sometimes he would still be busying himself on his cell phone in the middle of the night. I could see how worn out and frayed he seemed. It made my blood boil. I mean, the nerve of his boss. Did he not understand that my husband had the right to enjoy a personal life? If Marcus Sutcliffe wanted to work him into the ground, then at the very least he should be paying him overtime. I was about 6 months pregnant, suffering from a barrage of morning sickness, which would afflict me at any time of the day, morning or night. At the time we lived in Seattle, in a relatively decent green leafy neighbourhood, where we rented out a fully furnished, ultra-modern, contemporary semi-detached home. Life was very good. We were looking forward to the arrival of our new baby in 3 months. I was making plans to prepare a cute little nursery for my unborn child, whom I had recently learnt was a baby girl, that I was going to call Sienna. I'm not an interfering woman by any manner of means, nor do I like to interfere or meddle in my husband's affairs. But after seeing him in such a stressed-out state, I knew I invariably needed to do something about it. I couldn't sit back and watch him wearing himself into the ground like this. I knew my regular rendezvous at the trendy little coffee shop on 2nd Avenue was what was needed to get some sound advice from my sagacious friends. Here in Seattle we're big coffee enthusiasts. Seattle is a world centre for coffee drinking, so we pretty much consider ourselves connoisseurs when it comes to indulging in the rich, aromatic, high-caffeine beverage. "Oh, there she is at last," said my friend Erica, when I made my appearance at the quaint little coffee shop, with their nifty tables swathed in red and white checkered tablecloths clustered together in an alfresco French style, rather reminding me of the charming little coffee shops in Paris, with the flamboyant, warm, congenial uptown atmosphere. My 2 friends were seated cosily at a table for our weekly gathering. I enjoyed these little tete-a-tetes. I was holding my stomach awkwardly as I approached the table, ever grateful to sink into a seat, audibly sighing as my derriere rested on the comfortable upholstered chair. It was good to get my feet off the ground. "Are you all right, Sasha? You look like you have the weight of the world on your shoulders. More like my shoulders and my belly, I joked. So what's troubling you? You look flustered. It's not good for the baby, you know, to be so stressed out like this, said Erica, looking rather concerned. Do you know they say that babies can feel if a mother is strained? I grabbed my stomach, holding it protectively. It's a combination of things. It's nausea, and my incessant worrying about James. Erica raised a quizzical brow. Why are you worried about James? She asked. If you must know, his boss is only piling on the work like there's no tomorrow. I've seen how exhausted and frazzled he's become, working the craziest, most unreasonable hours. It's ludicrous. If I had my way, I'd wring his boss's neck for working him like a donkey. Sometimes it seems like he's miles away. Other times he's peevish and crabby. He'll snap at me for no reason at all. You know what James is like. He's normally such a relaxed soul. Not these days. Something's really irking him. That's not right. It's not healthy for you, nor for James or your unborn baby to be living in such a pressurized environment, said Erica. Has he spoken to his boss? Told him that he's a slave driver? It's not reasonable for him to be working at home. I sighed. You know how James is. He's very conscientious and driven, far too polite to ruffle his boss's feathers. I know he'll just grin and get on with it, but I can see he's worn to a frazzle. Why don't you tell him you think your husband is burning the candle at both ends, that perhaps he might consider reducing the workload? You think I can do that? I asked. I hardly want to come across as the intrusive busybody interfering wife, sticking my nose where it doesn't belong. Do you know his boss? Alicia asked me. Of course I know him. I've been to a couple of formal work dinners with him and his wife Diane. They're a very nice couple, actually. My impression of Marcus is he's a decent person. He seemed terribly nice to me. I'm not sure in hindsight that he's so reasonable, given how hard he's working my husband. Well, there you go, then. You have an absolute right to approach him on friendly terms, as a dutiful, solicitous wife. You can tell him that you're increasingly worried about your husband's welfare, that his workload has become increasingly objectionable. I mean, what harm can it possibly do? I knew Alicia was absolutely right, so I swiftly made an appointment to see my husband's boss privately at 9:30 the following morning. I'd just have to hope the appointment would be very discreet, that my husband wouldn't receive wind of it. If he knew I was secretly going behind his back, arranging meetings with his boss, he would be more than a little humiliated. I knew my husband was not himself of late. I assured myself I only had his best interests at heart. I couldn't just sit back and watch him fall apart before my very eyes. The following morning I was ushered into Marcus Sutcliffe's reception area by his accommodating receptionist Liesl Gray, that recognised me instantly as James's wife. "Hello, Sasha! Oh, it's so great to see you! What are you doing here? This is a lovely surprise." "Oh, you know, I'm checking in on my husband, but I would appreciate it if you don't tell him about my assembly with your boss. It might just upset him." "Of course I won't. It's good to see you, Sasha. Pregnancy suits you. You're positively glowing." "Thanks. I don't really feel it. I'm exhausted. I'm suffering from continuous nausea." "Oh, you poor thing. My sister was exactly like that, as sick as a dog throughout her entire pregnancy." "Oh, there we go," she said. At the precise moment the beeper on the phone lit up with a red light, which she answered, while her keen eyes remained fixed on me. "Yes, Marcus, she's here. Shall I send her in, then?" She looked up at me. "Marcus will see you now, Sasha," she said, putting down the receiver whilst mouthing, "Good luck." Marcus Sutcliffe was sitting at his gleaming mahogany desk when I walked into his office. He was a smart, handsome man, fastidiously turned out in a pinstriped suit, with a sleek head of dark cropped hair, and brown kind eyes that were discerning and astute. He stood up upon seeing me with a broad grin on his face, then came over to me, kissing me effusively on both cheeks, his gaze dropping curiously to my pregnant belly. "Hello, Sasha! Not long now," he said, looking at me brightly. "I think James was saying you only have 3 months left before the world is dramatically changed for the both of you, with a little pitter-patter of tiny feet and lots of sleepless nights, if I'm not mistaken. Enjoy the peace while you still get it. Believe me, I know all about it." "I'm looking forward to it being all over, I must admit. I'm not going to kid. What they don't tell you about pregnancy is that your mind becomes like jello. Sometimes it's hard to even think straight. I've even become very clumsy. I'm always breaking things. It drives James quite mad." My wife said the very same thing when she was pregnant with Candace. She kept saying her mind had turned to marshmallow, he said, gesturing for me to take a seat. So what do I owe this unexpected surprise? He asked, looking at me earnestly. It's about my husband James. I thought as much, he said, raising a curious brow. Is everything all right at home? No, not really. I feel James is working far too hard. Marcus looked puzzled. I was thinking he looked rather drained the other day, I have to say. I thought it was all about the excitement of having an upcoming baby on the way. Why do you think he's working too hard, Sasha? I was hoping you could tell me that, Marcus. I notice he has so much overtime to do when he returns home every evening. Sometimes he's cracking the whip at both ends at 12 o'clock at night. He says he's inundated and swamped by the workload. I was hoping you could reduce it a little. He's utterly exhausted, overwhelmed by it all, to be perfectly honest with you. Actually, I'm growing increasingly concerned about his health. Marcus looked perturbed. I don't give any of my staff overtime, Sasha. I'm a firm believer that when they leave the building, they leave their work behind with them. Whatever your husband has been doing, it hasn't been overtime on my account. I can assure you of that. This time it was my turn to look bewildered. I could feel my cheeks burning red with embarrassment. I'm so sorry, Marcus, I stammered. I had absolutely no idea. That wasn't the impression James gave me at all. I seem to have got my wires crossed. I really do apologise. Well, it might be a good idea to ask him what's going on, said Marcus, running his hands pensively through his brown hair. I mean, his work here is slacking a little, if I'm being brutally honest with you. I think something is clearly bothering him. Even I have noticed his demeanour lately. He's not himself. He's become quite crotchety and grumpy. I've been rather concerned about him. He seems unusually tense, rather on edge. I've noticed that too, I said. That's why I came to see you. I'll get to the bottom of this, I assured Marcus. Thanks so much for seeing me. I'm sorry to have taken up your valuable time like this. It's only a pleasure, Sasha. It's been lovely to see you again. I hope you get to the bottom of this enigmatic situation with your husband. I walked away from that office, my head a complete whirl. I felt more than a little humiliated, pleading James' case for him, only to find my husband had been lying to me. He was working at something behind my back that was draining and sucking the life out of him. But the question was what? When I returned home, I was all guns blazing. I was quite literally ready to declare World War III on my husband. But things didn't pan out quite as I was anticipating, as invariably they never ever do. I was to discover James sitting at the walnut kitchen table, in one hell of a state. I'd never seen my husband look like this before. I could see his olive-skinned face was as white as a sheet. His jaw had tightened significantly, while his eyes darted around the kitchen like an anxious ferret. "What on earth is wrong?" I asked him, forgetting completely about how mad I was with him, as an anxious concern now swept over me. "James, you're scaring the hell out of me. You look like you've been to the doctor's office today, and he's announced you've only got 2 months left to live with an inoperable form of brain cancer. What's going on?" My husband brushed his hand over his mouth. "You're barking up the wrong tree there, Munchkin. But what I've got to tell you is very bad." I stared at my husband, feeling my heart pounding in my chest as I virtually gulped the air. "You've got something bad to tell me? How bad?" "Now you really are scaring me." "Very bad." "Oh, my God, what have you done?" "I've done something very, very stupid. Insanely stupid. You're not going to be happy with me at all, Sasha." "Go on," I said, feeling the nausea welling up in the back of my throat as I clutched my stomach tightly. Hearing my husband's unsavoury announcement was certainly ensuring my nausea was escalating at an alarming rate. In truth, I felt like throwing up violently, but I resisted the temptation by shifting in my seat, trying to remain very still. "I've got myself in a little pickle over the last few months, I'm afraid. I've borrowed a sizable amount of money from a loan shark. He's expecting it back with a ludicrous amount of interest by the end of this month. If I don't pay it back, there's going to be hell to pay. And I don't say that lightly." "What kind of trouble are you talking about?" This time it was my face that was growing an ashen white, as I tried to comprehend my husband's disquieting words. "Let's just say that I don't want to find out. I don't want to sugarcoat anything. We're in a big mess, Sasha. This loan shark, his name is Joel Bloomberg. He's not a good person. He has a baleful, fearsome reputation of making people who don't pay him back disappear off the face of the earth, never ever to be seen again. There are all kinds of speculative, foreboding rumours about him. No one can prove a single thing, of course. They never can with people like him. He covers his tracks seamlessly. He's been investigated by the police numerous times, but they can never pin a thing on him. But let's just say this, he has a merciless reputation. He's ruthless, aggressive, downright dangerous." I gasped. "Why would you deal with someone like that? Oh my God, what are we going to do? This is absolutely terrible." "That's it. We're going to have to get away from here, leave our lives behind in Seattle, move somewhere where we can live undercover. We can try and assume different identities, give ourselves different names. I'll have to find a cash-in-hand job so that we do not leave behind a paper trail of any kind, as this man will find us, if we don't watch our backs, of course." "How much money do you owe this money lender?" "You don't want to know." "How much?" "I need to know. You can't keep this kind of stuff from me. I'm your wife, for goodness sake. I deserve to know the truth." "It's not good for your pregnancy. You don't want to stress yourself out. You could get preeclampsia. You know what the doctor said. It's easy for stress to exacerbate high blood pressure in pregnancy." "I think it's a bit late for that. I'm already stressing out, so you better tell me, and tell me now." $300,000. $300,000? How the hell are we going to afford to pay that back by the end of the month? "We can't. There's no way we can. It's not remotely possible." "I don't understand, James. How did you get to borrow $300,000? Tell me that. Who lends that kind of money? It's obscene. What on earth were you thinking? Why on earth would you do something like this? We haven't got the capacity to pay back that kind of money. You know we haven't. I don't think I could even ask my parents to raise that cash on a whim for us, even if I begged them to help us out. Besides, I'd never dream of asking them for money like that. What on earth did you spend it on?" "I've got a problem with gambling. I gambled all our savings away online. I thought I could make it big for us. I really did. I got carried away, Sasha. I did first win over $80,000. I got excited about that. Then I lost it all. I thought it would change our lives. There were these gambling sites online, free opportunities to have a go. I guess I got hooked, reeled in." "Surely you know those things are rigged. Doesn't everybody know that? I guess that explains why you've been tapping away at your cell phone every night until the early hours of the morning. You've been gambling while I wrongly assumed Marcus was working you like a dog. More fool me. I feel like a prize idiot for not guessing what was going on. But lately with my pregnancy, I've had cauliflower growing between my ears. I'm really sorry, Sasha. I don't blame you for any of this. It's all my fault. I take full responsibility. I got carried away. There's no excuse for what I've done." "No, there isn't. I feel sick to my stomach, James. I wanted to cry, but I couldn't. My tears were dry. I wanted to feel something, but I couldn't either. I was numb. I didn't feel anything at all. Instead, I stared blankly into space as I tried to assimilate the full gravity of what my husband was telling me. I wasn't even angry with him. I was too worn out to be angry, too stunned, disorientated, confused to make any sense of any of this at all. "Please tell me this is a nightmare," I thought to myself, "that I'm going to wake up from it any time soon." My husband was inadvertently telling me that we needed to disappear, that if he didn't pay the loan shark back, that something quite terrible was likely to happen to him, which left me with a hollow pit in the bottom of my gut. How the hell did we get entangled in a mess like this? Was this not the sort of thing that happened to other people? Not a mediocre run-of-the-mill couple like us that lived in a leafy green Seattle neighborhood. "Say something, Sasha," said my husband. "Are you going to leave me?" "Leave you?" I said, raising a brow. "I think you've forgotten, James, that I'm actually your wife. I'm carrying our baby. I love you. We're embroiled in this mess together, whether you like it or not. Yes, I'm not happy with what you've done. Not happy at all. I should be screaming my lungs out, calling you every obscenity on the earth, and accusing you of ruining our lives. But in truth, I'm too shell-shocked to react. You've been a prize idiot, but I'm your wife. I'm not going to desert you, just because the going gets tough. Isn't that what marriages are about? Staying together in sickness and health. What you did was seriously sick in the head, but it's water under the bridge now. I wouldn't blame you if you wanted to leave me. I squandered everything. I've messed up big time. You've messed up, but I'm not going to leave you. But you can't gamble anymore. You've got to stop, James. Otherwise, this addiction of yours is literally going to destroy our lives and our baby's future. You've already blown our savings from what you're telling me. We virtually have no money left in the bank, which might explain why on Tuesday my card was refused at the checkout. I thought you'd forgotten to put in the funds to my account. Luckily, I had some cash to get myself out of that prickly predicament. I just wish you'd told me sooner that you were having problems. We could have nipped this in the bud. You could have got yourself some professional help. I know, you're absolutely right. But the question is, what are we going to do? We barely have any money.
Can you not call the police, James, I ask, knowing full well what my husband's answer to that would be.
No way. You can't call the police on thugs like this. That would make things 1,000 times worse for us.
Me and my husband talked diligently to the early hours of the morning, deciding what course of action we were going to take. We needed to disappear, but vanishing is never easy. I knew that there are people in Japan known as the jujitsu, which is a Japanese word for evaporation, when people deliberately decide to disappear from their own lives on purpose, seemingly vanishing into thin air. They leave their homes, their jobs, and their families, sometimes not being seen for decades. There are even companies you can hire in Japan to help you disappear in the middle of the night, without a trace. Abused women running away from husbands, or people leaving stressed jobs or abusive families, or even running away to escape their own lives. In our case, we were running away from an evil debt collector, who more than likely would cause my husband seriously bodily harm, or, dare I say, even kill him. Of course, I didn't articulate those very words. They remained unspoken between us, but we were both thinking them. I knew that, like those individuals in Japan, we needed to vanish off the face of the earth, without leaving a single trace. We had to assume new identities, and this was not going to be easy. But then I had a great idea. I phoned my best friend using a burner phone, so hopefully the call wouldn't be traced. Melinda Beckingsdale's parents lived on a farm in West Virginia, which was a sizable 36 hours away from Seattle. They often needed help on their farm. Furthermore, they had a little cottage where we might be able to live on the land. I decided to give her a call.
Melinda, it's Sasha. Oh my God, Sasha, is that you? It's been forever. I haven't seen you in an age. How are you doing?
Not so well, I'm afraid. I've got myself in a spot of bother, or rather should I say James has. He's got us into the trouble, which is an understatement, actually.
Oh no! What happened? Are you all right? Is there anything I can possibly do?
Well, there is. Do your parents perhaps need a hand on their farm? Is their cottage available? I remember you saying they were always looking out for help on the farm.
Melinda chuckled. You know them, Sasha. They always need help. They're very selective, of course, about where they get that help from. You know them, they're so private. As it happens, the cottage is free. Are you wanting to move in? If you help them on the farm, you can have it rent-free, no problems, and they'll pay you cash in hand for any work you do. I guess it's what you're looking for in the circumstances. Besides, I'm sure they'd be so delighted to have you two around. What on earth is going on? I'd love to help, Sasha. It's complicated. The less you know, the better. Don't be silly, Sasha. Let me help. I'd like to help in any way that I can. If the boot was on the other foot, you wouldn't hesitate to help me either. Well, my husband's in trouble with a very formidable loan shark, who's a slippery, shady character, if ever I saw one. He's demanding James to pay him $300,000 by the end of the month, or else. I don't even want to imagine what else means, but let's just say it's an unarticulated, deadly threat. There's no way on this earth that James can pay that kind of money back. So we have to vanish off the face of the earth so that this unscrupulous, corrupt character doesn't actually find us. If you get on his wrong side, you don't pay him back. He has a habit of making his clients disappear for good, never to be seen ever again, if you get my drift. It's terrifying stuff. The man is treacherous. You've got to be kidding, Sasha. That is terrible. I've heard stories about unethical loan sharks before that would make your hair curl. You need to watch your back, Sasha. Both of you do. Those people have no scruples, no moral compass, no sense of decency whatsoever. They charge obscene amounts of interest, and they can really be so dangerous. Why does your husband James owe them so much? A gambling addiction, would you believe it? I didn't even know about it. I naively thought he was working overtime when he was spending all his time gambling online. I can't believe that I was so ignorant at failing to see what was going on under my very nose. Oh my goodness, that's so bad, Sasha. I'm sorry. Gambling addiction is a huge problem. Those online sites are a hell of a temptation for any addict. I remember going to a casino once, seeing people throwing their life savings down the plug hole. It's desperately sad. Some of them look like such lost souls. It just breaks your heart. Are you sure, Melinda, that your parents will be agreeable for us to live in their cottage? We would earn our keep, we really would. We desperately need a change of address and a way to make a living indefinitely so that we can keep under the radar. We'll do absolutely anything. Don't you worry your cotton socks, Sasha. It's all sorted out. I'll speak to my folks for you. My parents would simply love having you staying there. I'll tell them to keep their mouths shut about your presence on their property. Not that you need to worry. They're not exactly garrulous. Are you sure I can't try and raise that money that you owe for you? But to get hold of that money, I will need a couple of weeks first. Melinda, I can't ask you to do that. That would be crazy. It's good of you to offer, though. I'd love to accept your offer, though, of living on the farm in your cottage, if you're sure we won't be an imposition. Of course you won't be. I'm so glad to be able to help. I know my parents will be over the moon having that extra help with harvesting peaches and apples and dealing with the rotational corn crops. You'll be a godsend to them. They'll appreciate the extra help on the farm, and the good company, of course. I don't know what to say. You're a gem. You've quite literally saved our lives. It's no trouble, Sasha. I know if I was in the same kind of pickle, you would do the same for me. How's your pregnancy going, by the way? I'm 6 months gone. I'm suffering from the most horrendous morning sickness. This pregnancy hasn't been easy. You poor, poor thing. This is all you need to be moving away when you're so heavily pregnant. But still needs must. You must be as mad as hell with James for letting you down like this. You know, I possibly should be, Melinda, but frankly, I'm too shattered to be angry. Pregnancy just drains you so much. I felt so relieved after speaking to Melinda. I knew she would come through for us. She'd always been a great friend of mine. Before long, my husband and I made plans to disappear in the middle of the night, to make the long drawn-out drive to West Virginia, which was going to be a 36-hour trip. We had informed our landlord we were leaving her fully furnished apartment, while James had spoken to his boss, given his notice. Marcus was sorry to see him go, but very understanding, promising to keep his mouth firmly shut. I had decided not to say goodbyes to any of my girlfriends, as the less people that knew about our vanishing plan, the better. We could not afford to be too careful. It was very distressing to leave my life behind in Seattle, to not contact any of my friends. I managed to sell my car to raise some much-needed available cash. We were well on our way. We closed our bank accounts, bought several burner phones without internet connections, got rid of our original cell phones, as they can so easily be traced. Besides, without an internet connection, my husband James would be forced to go cold turkey. Hopefully we could say goodbye to his online addiction, although ideally he really did require professional help. But being on the run, we weren't in the position of acquiring it for him. I would speak to my parents on a burner phone once a month. As they lived in Atlanta, they wouldn't have a clue that we were no longer in Seattle. The less they knew about our plans, the better. I didn't want to embroil them in our fiasco, cause them undue stress. As they were already dealing with a plethora of health issues, I didn't want to add stress to the equation. James and I woke up at about 1 o'clock in the morning on the day we were leaving. We packed all our worldly possessions in the back of our truck. I physically went out into the street to check that there were no suspicious cars, secretly keeping watch over our home, as you can never be too sure of the lengths a debt collector would be prepared to go to It had come to my attention during the day that a black BMW had been following me around town, so I was fully aware I was being watched by these insidious characters. I felt reasonably confident that no one was watching our house right now. The quiet street appeared sleepy, with not a solitary soul in sight. All that greeted me was a Seattle cool breeze. A few of the oak trees swayed their branches in the wind, while the street lights lit up the dark, shadowy corners. I really did feel satisfied that we were safe to leave and make our hasty escape, like two fugitives on the run from the police. Needless to say, the long journey in our truck was exhausting for a pregnant woman, so we did make a couple of stopovers at bed and breakfasts on the way, where we paid cash in hand for our overnight stops, where we were privileged to stay with a couple of delightful couples who made us cordially welcome in their homes and luckily didn't ask too many probing questions. Wherever we went, I knew we would never be able to fully relax. We had to be vigilant about every move we made, as anyone could be watching us from the shadows. Finally, we found ourselves only minutes away from Melinda's parents' farm. The relief I felt was immeasurable, as being cooped up in the truck for so long had been a disagreeable experience for a normal functioning adult, but for a pregnant woman it had been completely insufferable. Sadly, we couldn't risk taking a short flight to Virginia, which would have been infinitely more preferable, but would have left behind a paper trail. Besides, we needed my husband's truck. I was hoping that we had left no record of ourselves that could be uncovered by those nefarious loan sharks who were not prepared to accept monthly instalments and were charging a ludicrous amount of interest on my husband's loan, which was nothing short of criminal extortion. We really had no choice but to disappear. "Well, you'll be glad to know, Sasha, we're nearly there. I can hardly wait," my husband exclaimed. "Oh, I am glad," I said, sighing with relief. "I can't wait to stretch my weary legs." We had driven off the interstate and were now driving in rugged countryside, surrounded by tall statuesque trees on high embankments, sporadically passing farmers' fields of corn, barley, wheat or tobacco. Before long we drove down a bumpy road that was shaped like a crooked finger. It may well have been asphalt at one time, but it was crumbled and worn away, heavily overgrown by weeds. We took a few swift turns and finally saw a signpost to Honeybrook Farm. We were soon driving down an earthen country road that led to a large black iron gate that was left wide open for us. I could see a dilapidated sign attached to the iron bars that had been worn away by the weather, saying Honeybrook Farm. It appeared really rather rusty. We drove past orchards of apples and peach trees, a field of corn and a meadow with a couple of horses frolicking away happily and grazing in a field. Finally, we arrived at the breathtakingly beautiful farmhouse nestled in the heart of the valley, surrounded by masterful, imposing backdrops of mountains that dappled the furthest horizon in a hazy purple hue. The rear of the property was heavily fringed by a vast, resplendent, impressive-looking wood grove made up of mature statuesque oak and maple trees. The farmhouse itself was a double-storey symmetrical affair, a vast red brick building, with large sash windows and matching black shutters, a grey slate roof and a wraparound porch on the lowest elevation, framed by ornate columns that led directly to the front door. I could see a man with a full thatch of thick white hair, wearing a blue plaid shirt and jeans, dashing down the steps, ambling hurriedly towards us as we parked our truck on the red brick driveway. "Come on in," he said, opening the truck door and shaking my husband's hand profusely while giving him a friendly thump on the back. "It's very good to meet you. You must be James. Melinda has told me all about you. My name is Clive. I'm Melinda's father." "Pleased to meet you, Clive," said my husband, giving the man a big grin. Clive bounded over to my side of the truck, opening the door for me. I was well acquainted with the jovial farmer, thanks to my long-standing friendship with his daughter Melinda. Clive looked remarkably good for a man in his late 60s, as with the exception of his thick white hair, he didn't look a day over 40. I thought it must be the fresh air and exercise that kept him in such good nick. He did not appear to have succumbed to the pear-shaped effects of gravity that affect so many. I secretly hoped that I could age this gracefully. "It's so good to see you, Sasha," he said, giving me a warm, affectionate hug and glancing down at my huge belly. "Melinda told me you were heavily pregnant. When is it due?" "I'm due in 3 months," I said. "Oh, it'll be exciting having a baby around the place. Hetty would love to do some babysitting for you, I'm sure. She adores babies. You two must come in at once. Have some refreshments before I take you up to the cottage." As if on cue, Hetty came rushing out of the house, oscillating her arms excitedly in effusive dramatic gestures that displayed her enthusiasm to see us. Her heavily lined face breaking out into a broad beam. She was a bubbly woman in her early 60s, slightly rounded around the hips, with a full head of short grey hair that had been stylishly cut in a way that made her appear elegant and younger in years. Her 2 large black rambunctious Labradors did not relinquish their enthusiasm either. They'd been trained not to jump up on strangers, but that did not stop them from showering us with a gleeful welcome, which included thumping their tails on the ground and letting out a couple of exuberant woofs. "Please come in," she said, giving me a big hug and offering me an expressive explanation at the size of my bump. "Do you mind?" she said, putting her hand on my stomach. "May I have a feel?" "Of course," I said. Hetty led us to her gorgeous country-style kitchen. It was incredibly stunning, very stylish, with white cabinetry, white quartz surfaces, and it gleamed. There was also a flagstone floor. The kitchen door overlooked a sizable backyard, where she grew all the family vegetables, from squashes, tomatoes to spinach and lettuce. I could see dozens of free-range hens meandering through the vegetable beds, gleaming worms for themselves. It really felt as if we were in the south of France. It had that quintessential rustic feel about it. "Now you sit down, please," said Hetty, insisting I get my legs up. "You must both be so exhausted after your trip," she said, bustling around and putting a large kettle onto the gas hob of her range. "I think some tea's in order, don't you?" "Sounds lovely," I said. "I mean to say, Hetty, thank you so much for letting us move into your cottage. Melinda explained to us that you need a fresh start, to keep a low profile. Frankly, you couldn't have chosen a better place than our home to hide out in. This is quite a sanctuary we have here. I think you should feel very safe. Besides, I'm sure Heath will keep a good eye on you. He can be a grumpy old man at times, but his heart's in the right place. He's very, very protective. He'll definitely have your backs, and that makes me feel very assured." I was just about to ask Hetty who Heath actually was when Cliff began to talk about the cottage. "It's fully furnished," he explained. "It's an apple pie order. A very pretty, beguiling place, overlooking a fabulous creek, fringed by lots and lots of trees. You will definitely love it there. I can offer you plenty of work on the farm. In truth, I was about to employ an extra farmhand to help me, so you've come around at the perfect time." "That'll be great," said James. "I really appreciate it." "We consider you friends. Don't forget that for a moment. We're terribly pleased to have you both staying here. Me and Hetty are rather private people, usually wary of strangers, so having familiar faces around here, or friends of Melinda's, is an honour for us. We're very, very glad you came. We appreciate the company as well." "Do you have any other workers here helping you?" I asked, growing a little concerned. "I'm just worried that they might talk, you know, as we need to be very discreet. There's a dangerous man who will try his uttermost to locate us, a lone shark that can't be trusted." "You need not worry, dear, about that. My workers are exceedingly trustworthy people. They've been with me for many years. They're not big talkers. Besides, with your new names, no one is likely to guess that you are the Harpers that ran away from Seattle. What have you decided to call yourselves? I assume you are changing your names." "Yes, I thought I'd call myself Sarah Taylor, as that's close to Sasha, and my husband's going to call himself Johnny Taylor." "That's very good. I like the sound of that. I think that won't be very difficult to remember. Sarah and Johnny. Yes, it rolls off the tongue rather easily." "Now for some tea," said Hetty. I was shocked to see that she prepared some tea not only for us, but for her 2 boisterous Labradors, who lapped it up enthusiastically after it had been cooled down in their doggy bowls. "You give your dogs tea?" I asked in surprise. "Yes, I do. Would you believe it? They love it. I only started to give it to them when Bella started barking every time I drank tea. So just to humour her, I placed some in a bowl. She loved it. I swear to you it's actually improved their health. You know, black tea is full of antioxidants. It can boost your heart health, cell function, blood sugar levels. My vet has asked me why they're positively glowing. He's seen a vast improvement in their health. I swear it's the tea. Who would have imagined that that was possible?" "I guess stranger things have happened," I said. "I have a friend who swears a tablespoon of turmeric in her dog's food has added years to her dog's life. I think it's a powerful anti-inflammatory." I watched the dogs in fascination as they lapped up their tea. "Would you like some blueberry muffins, dear?" Hetty asked me. "Love some," I said. "Did you bake them yourself? They're absolutely delicious." "Hetty's a big baker," said Clive proudly. "I'm a very lucky man indeed. It's a good job I work the fields very hard. I'd probably be the size of a small tractor by now if I didn't, with Hetty's sumptuous cooking all the time." After tea, Clive jumped into his truck. He asked us to follow him in our truck, and we did so, driving past a couple of meadows down the windy gravel road with a signpost that said Windy Willow's Cottage. We followed the road and found ourselves staring at the prettiest cottage we'd ever seen. It was a red brick home like the main farmhouse, but a much smaller version, as if done in miniature, with black shutters, a grey slate roof, along with the cutest wraparound porch that overlooked a pretty little creek, heavily fringed by statuesque oak trees. "It's absolutely gorgeous," I said to Clive, "just like your farmhouse, only in miniature." "Well, that's the general idea. We built the cottage with the idea of retirement in mind, so that moving in here one day would be pretty straightforward. We could rent out the main farmhouse and the land to a younger, more aspiring farmer in the future. It would be hard to give up the big farmhouse, so we made a miniature version of it. Hence Windy Willow Cottage, here we are," he said. I watched him ferreting around in his pocket to pull out a bunch of keys, which jangled in his hands as he handed them to James. "These are the keys for the cottage. I'll love you and leave you. I'm sure you're both dying to get unpacked and to have a much-needed hot bath. There'll be plenty of hot water on tap. I'm sure you must be feeling sticky after all the travelling. And you, young lady, you need to put your feet up and relax. We can't have you giving birth 3 months prematurely, can we?" he said, winking at me. "I just want to say, Clive," I said, enveloping him in a big warm hug, "you have absolutely no idea how incredibly grateful James and I are for what you've done for the both of us, giving us this place to stay and somewhere to work on your farm. You've quite literally saved our skins." Clive chuckled, raising his hand to his temple in a mock salute. "I'm glad to be of service," he teased. "It's a pleasure." In truth, I was more than a little overwhelmed as we entered the cute little 2-story cottage. It was so enchanting. The lower floor had been transformed into open-plan living at its finest, as the fashionable ultra-modern kitchen was sprinkled flamboyantly with a dash of old-world vintage charm that gave the kitchen a unique look, as the classical influences ironed out the stark coldness so often seen in avant-garde cutting-edge designs. The kitchen folded seamlessly into the living area, then into the library. The library was fitted with bespoke bookshelves, bursting with hundreds of books from how to propagate your own ferns to the secrets of great mystics. There was a lot to read. The library then folded into the sitting room, which possessed a huge open fiery grate with a very elegant marble mantel, and then there was an ornate sweeping staircase lined with a long ribbon of Persian carpet that led to the upper floors, showcasing 4 bedrooms, one main bedroom with its bathroom en suite, and a separate bathroom to accommodate the remaining bedrooms. Everything had been meticulously decorated, with glamorous upholstered chairs, sumptuous settees, and verbose oakwood furnishing. "What's wrong, Sasha?" asked my husband, seeing my eyes misting over with tears. "Don't you think the place is rather charming?" "Of course I do. Have you forgotten my name is Sarah?" I whispered. "I just can't believe the kindness of these people. I'm so moved. I mean, I'm sure we'll never be found hiding out here." Little did I realize I was rather premature in my thinking. 36 hours away in Seattle, a young man shook his short crop of blonde curls nervously. He had been recruited to watch the Harpers' semi-detached Seattle residence day and night, but his boss did not know that last night he had failed to watch the house. He was certain that the couple were not going to do a runner, as his pedantic boss had insinuated. He had returned home to spend an early night with his girlfriend, who had been complaining bitterly that he was never around. What the boss did not know would not hurt him. Now this he could hardly believe, as he stared at the semi-detached house in horror, coming to the stunning revelation that it was unnaturally quiet. The blinds were all drawn when they would normally be open at this time of the morning. There was no truck parked in the driveway that would usually be used by the female resident, a woman called Sasha Harper. There were clearly no signs of life. It looked ominously and disturbingly quiet. Even as he approached the front door, he could see a professional-looking woman opening up the house with a massive bunch of jangling keys, who looked suspiciously like an agent or landlord. The man's heart sank like a huge stone disappearing into the murky depths of a large river. His gut seemed to twist around itself in knots, like twirls of spaghetti at the end of a fork. He climbed out of his smart black BMW, one of the perks of his job, and ambled casually over to the house with a nonchalant, carefree attitude. The agent saw the young man approaching the front door that she was opening. She looked up at him in surprise through her eclectic red glasses that framed her curious green eyes. She smiled at the young man, flashing him a large set of perfect, expensive-looking white teeth. "Are you looking for the Harpers?" she asked. The man nodded sheepishly. "You're a friend of Sasha and James?" she asked. "I am indeed. I was just popping over to see if James fancied joining me for breakfast this morning." "They didn't tell you then?" said the woman in surprise. "Tell me what?" asked the man. "They gave me their notice a week ago," said the woman. "I'm their landlord. I'm about to lease the property to another young couple. It's a pity you missed them." "Do you know where they've gone?" "That's the strange thing," said the woman. "They left no forwarding address." The young man bowed his head politely to the woman. He ambled back to his black BMW, feeling exceedingly annoyed with himself. He slunk back on the leather seats, groaning, while he slammed the car door behind him. Then he began to slap the steering wheel with his hands, pounding it so hard like a punching bag, to express his seething rage, as he shouted out every four-lettered obscenity that came to his mind. "Bloody hell!" he squirmed. "What the heck am I going to do now? What a bloody idiot I am! The moment I turn my back, that young man and his pregnant wife have successfully inveigled me. They've done a runner. They could be anywhere in America right now." He had never suspected for a moment they would do a vanishing act on him. In no way had they behaved suspiciously in their daily, everyday routines. He had been well and truly hoodwinked. He felt like a prize idiot. The young man's stomach lurched, doing a series of acrobatic somersaults. He could feel the nauseous bile rising up in the back of his throat. He fought back the bitter, repugnant taste. He had to think very quickly on his feet. He didn't have much time. He knew what his guileful, duplicitous big boss, the debt collector Joe Bloomberg, was capable of. He glanced down at the two missing digits on his left hand. A stark reminder. They'd been chopped off by Joel when he'd failed to collect a debt on time. He recalled the harrowing moment of agonizing pain, when he thought Joel was pretending, making up a game of chopping off his fingers. But to his amazement, the machete had been slammed down on his two fingers. He'd screamed out in agonizing, excruciating pain, while his two fingers had been flung to the ground. He'd watched in horror as they'd been thrown to the dog, hungrily gobbled up. He had tried desperately to retrieve them from the dog, but the dog was not going to share his delicious treat with anyone. The vicious Rottweiler had growled warningly at him, while Joe Bloomberg had laughed. It made him sick to the stomach. Working for a man like Joel Bloomberg was terrifying. The man was a tyrant. He was fully aware of the trouble he would be in when he reported back to base. What was he going to say? "Sorry, Joel. The young couple that owe you $300,000 disappeared on my watch." He remembered the day he'd gone into Joel's office, seen the plastic Target bag on the silver tray that had swayed the contours of a man's severed head. A lone piece of blonde hair had popped out of a hole in the plastic. He had recognized it as belonging to Tom, who had been Joel Bloomberg's right-hand man. If that's what Joel did to his right-hand man, who had let him down, there was no telling what he was capable of doing now. That's what happened if you betrayed the likes of Joel Bloomberg. He had absolutely no loyalty to anyone. He would easily throw you to the wolves in a heartbeat. He'd remembered that poignant day as if it was yesterday, his big boss wearing the white sports jacket and pants with a thick gold chain around his neck. He'd acted so nonchalant, as if butter wouldn't melt in his mouth, when he'd seen the human head in the plastic bag perched on the silver tray, as if it was an ostrich egg on display. He recalled how Joel seemed indifferent to the severed head, as if it was no big deal to him. How could anyone be like that? To the young man, the image represented his biggest fears. He didn't want to end up the next severed head on Joel Bloomberg's desk. All Mr. Bloomberg was interested in was charging people excessive amounts of interest and making huge bucks out of his clients. No wonder he was rolling in money. People were absolutely petrified of the man. They would turn over all their worldly possessions to him just to save their skins. He knew that anyone doing business with Joel was dicing with death, playing Russian roulette with their own lives. For one thing was absolutely certain. If you upset Joel Bloomberg, you couldn't expect to be breathing for much longer. He couldn't figure out why Joel had lent such a measly amount of money to the young couple, when he was used to dealing with much bigger numbers. The young man pulled up Joel Bloomberg's grandiose driveway in his black BMW, where the grim, scowling security guard in the entrance opened up the large black ornate iron gates dutifully for him. He had parked in the pristine brick driveway, ambling towards the very tasteless, over-the-top palatial mansion, with a plethora of ornate columns and statues on display that framed the front arched entrance of the home. The huge bodyguard with his bubbly, beefy arms stood in the doorway like a belligerent Rottweiler. The man looked as if he spent his entire life injecting himself with steroids. "You'll find Mr. Bloomberg in his office," he barked. "He's expecting you." The young man trembled as he knocked at the door, glancing at the 2 missing digits on his left hand. His knees trembled. His heart thundered violently in his chest. His hands became wet and clammy. All he could do was hope and pray that his boss was in a good mood. It turned out he was. It was the young man's lucky day. "Come in," came Joel's voice. "Oh, there you are, Christopher," he said, lifting up a tot of whiskey, swinging it down in a vulgar glug. "I understand you've got some news for me." He was sitting in a tasteless chair that was ornately carved, painted in gold leaf, resembling a throne. All he needed was a crown, the young man thought to himself. "That's right, sir. I have. Good news, I hope." "I'm in a very, very good mood today, Christopher. I've learnt that I've become an uncle. At 3:30 this morning, my sister Juanita gave birth to a 7-pound baby boy. They've called him Joel after me. I'm very chuffed." "Of course you are, sir." "Wow, that is incredible. Congratulations are in order, sir. I'm very pleased for you. So what's your news, Christopher?" "I'm afraid the news isn't good, sir. The young Harper couple have done a runner, but they only borrowed pin money from you. It was only $300,000, not big money." "But how did that happen? You were supposed to be watching the house," Joel growled angrily, his eyes widening in an expression of displeasure. "You know I don't like it when people do a runner." "Sir, I'm sorry. I became violently ill. I ate a dodgy curry. I think it was gone rancid or something. I had to throw up on the side of the road. I saw the couple hurriedly leave, but I couldn't stop hurling. They managed to escape. I was violently ill, sir. There was nothing I could do to stop it." "You bloody idiot. You're lucky I'm in a good mood, Chris, or I might have removed another 2 of your digits." "Yes, sir. I'm sorry, sir," said Chris, taking a gulp of relieved fresh air. He had dodged a bullet. Losing another 2 digits would have been too much to stomach. It was hard operating with 2 less fingers on his left hand anyway. "Well, you know what we need to do now. You have a month to find the couple. I don't care what you do. You need to find them, or I will not be a happy man. Do you understand, Christopher? You don't want to be around me when I'm unhappy." "I do bad things when I'm not pleased," he said, focusing his eyes on Chris's missing digits. Chris shuddered. He certainly got the message. "Yes, sir. I'll find them, sir. I promise you, sir, I will. Someone must know where they've gone." In West Virginia, 36 hours away, it would seem that me and my husband James had settled very well into farm life, becoming close to Clive and his wife Hetty, along with their 2 adorable black Labradors. James had been giving Clyde a hand on the farm. By all accounts, he was enjoying the outdoor life. He'd already developed a golden tan on his face. The black circles from tense, overwrought exhaustion had dissipated. Instead of looking fearful and anxious, his brown eyes wore a happy, contented look. I smiled happily to myself. I hadn't seen my husband look this upbeat in a long time. He had even admitted to me that the lure of gambling online had dissipated. He barely gave the internet a second thought. After bracing the elements every morning, driving the tractor, riding the horses and attending to the crops, He felt exhausted by the end of the day, but in a good way. He loved nothing more than to unwind after a hard day's work with an ice-cold beer in his hand, watching the sky develop in a tangerine orange, yellow and pink hue as the sun set over the valley. He loved watching the bedazzling views on the wraparound porch that overlooked the beguiling creek. He also enjoyed watching the few deers that would gather together, congregating at the water to enjoy a drink. These days I'm glad to say that my morning sickness was a lot more manageable. We both had promptly decided that we would live as Sarah and Jonathan Taylor. When the time was right, we would put enough money away and try and get false IDs and open up new bank accounts. One night, me and my husband were sitting on the back porch. We saw a shadowy figure moving through the trees, standing yards away from us, looking directly at us through curious eyes. "Oh my God, it's a Bigfoot! What else can it be?" I whispered. "I can't believe it." "By Jove, I do believe you're right. I didn't even think those things were real." We'd only seen the creature for a fleeting second. It had happened far too quickly for me to get a full overview of it, but I had seen it studying us with a look of intrigue on its human-like face. I couldn't wait to tell Hetty in the morning what I'd seen. I doubted she would believe my story. I could hardly believe it. The following morning I scrambled hurriedly towards the main farmhouse, my face flushed pink with excitement. Hetty had ushered me into the kitchen, where I received the usual rapturous welcome from the two black Labradors. I watched her engage in her usual ritual of preparing the four of us tea. So while the two dogs lapped down their warm beverage, Hetty and I took respectable little sips out of mugs of tea at the kitchen table. I was naturally bursting with enthusiasm to tell her my story. "Out with it," said Hetty. "I can tell you're bursting at the seams to tell me something. Get on with it." "Last night I saw a Bigfoot," I told her. "I know you won't believe me, but I'm not making this up." "Oh, I see. So Heath has revealed himself to you, has he?" laughed Hetty. "You've obviously won him round, then. He would never show himself to you unless he approves of your energy. Bigfoots are all about energy. They read it all the time, like you or I might read body language. They have the innate ability to look into your mind, to read your thoughts." "You know that, Bigfoot?" "Oh, yes, I know Heath very well, dear. He's getting on in age now, but he watches over the farm for us. I feel infinitely safer knowing he's around. He's been on this farm from when I was a little girl. He'd watch over us kids for my father when we were very young. One time when I was little, I fell down a ditch. He rescued me. He brought me safely back home. He's always been a quiet, unassuming fellow, rather reticent, reserved, but he watches over this farm like a hawk. He knows everything that's going on." "But I don't understand. Aren't Bigfoots supposed to be dangerous? I mean, I've heard stories." "Well, Heath would be dangerous if he needed to be. If someone untoward was wandering around our property, like one of those dodgy, inauspicious loan sharks that are after the two of you, he'll read those people's energy. So if a person's evil, he'll pick it up in a heartbeat. In Heath's mind, evil needs to be eliminated. So yes, he would be dangerous to someone with guileful intent. He doesn't have that human perspective that a person needs a fair trial before he's condemned. If an apple is rotten, it needs to be discarded. As far as Heath is concerned, that's the way he feels about things. A rotten human or a rotten Bigfoot needs discarding. He won't discriminate in that regard. He's very protective over this place and territorial, but like a lot of old people, he's got a little cranky in his old age. So the fact that he showed himself to you is a big deal. You've clearly won him round." "But I didn't do anything." "He clearly approved of your energy. He would have been watching you for quite some time from the shadows." "Oh, Hetty, are you saying what I think you're saying? That Heath would protect us if the need should arise?" "Oh, absolutely. He's seen you both staying in our cottage. He knows anyone staying on our farm is considered family, so he'll be keeping a watchful eye over you, especially your being pregnant. That will make him hugely protective towards you." "Where is his family?" "Well, they move around, but Heath being old just stays in one place. During the winter he makes himself cosy and comfortable in our barn. I often leave him stuff in the wood grove. He absolutely adores my blueberry muffins. I always make him a large batch. He's so appreciative." "Wow, that's incredible. Do you tell anyone about him?" "Oh, heavens, no. He's part of my family. I'd never tell anyone about him. That would be nonsensical to me. As far as anyone else is concerned, I wouldn't dream of acknowledging Bigfoot's are real. I want to protect Heath as much as he is desirous in protecting us." Back in Seattle, Marcus Sutcliffe climbed into his truck in the parking bay after a hard day at work. He was looking forward to spending the weekend with his wife and kids. They were planning on having a festive barbecue with other members of the Sutcliffe family and a handful of close family friends. It was going to be a great way to celebrate his wife's 40th birthday. They'd been looking forward to the celebratory occasion for many weeks now. As he trudged over to his truck to open the door, he felt a cold metal revolver being pointed at his temple. "Get into your truck," came a man's voice. "Drive." Marcus was hoping that the cameras at work would be capturing his abductor on film, but they were pointing in a different direction. Someone had deliberately moved them. "Drive," screamed the man, "or I'll put a bullet in your head." Marcus trembled as he started up his car. He looked at the young man with the blonde hair and blue eyes in surprise. He didn't look like a thug. "What do you want with me?" he stammered. "If it's money you want, you can take cash in my wallet. But please let me go. I've got 2 kids and a wife who need me. They can't afford to be without a father." "It's not your wallet I want, Mr. Sutcliffe. It's information I need. Now drive." Marcus obediently followed the man's directions fastidiously as he drove his truck out of Seattle. He was then asked to pull over to the side of the road near an embankment of trees, where he was gagged, blindfolded, and his hands tied behind his back, while he was thrown into the back of the trunk. "What are you doing with me? Please, please don't. I'm very frightened of confined spaces. I get claustrophobia. Please don't put me in the trunk. I beg you." "Not my problem," said the man. "Please, I beg you." What the hell was going on, Marcus wondered, as he began thumping around in the trunk, desperately trying to find a lever to open it from the inside, but there was nothing accessible for him to make his escape. He was beginning to feel his chest tightening as his heart began to race. He was suffering a full-blown panic attack, he knew he was. As his fear of confined spaces terrified him, he was struggling to breathe. But he told himself to calm down, to get a grip. He knew he could get through this situation if he kept his wits about him, he told himself. How long he was stuck in the back of the truck, he didn't know, but the man driving it had driven speedily and jolted a lot during the journey, making him conclude that they were somewhere in the countryside, as the previous smooth roads had become exceedingly bumpy and uneven. When the truck finally reached a standstill and was parked on a pebbly driveway, the trunk was flung open, the blindfold removed from his eyes. He was bundled out of the trunk. It was a dark, tenebrous night. Marcus stumbled over the precipitous turf. Having worn a blindfold for so long, he was struggling to see clearly, but the torch the young man was carrying lit up the pebbly path. "Get a move on," said the man, cuffing his hands behind his back, where he was led at gunpoint to a farm building. He was thrown into the barn to join the barrels of hay. The man switched on a dimmer light in the barn and studied Marcus through hostile eyes. "Now let's get down to business," said the man with the blonde hair and the seemingly angelic face, who had covered half his face with a bandana, so you couldn't see his profile clearly. But Marcus had seen his face earlier on, and didn't forget a face, especially not one like that. "I want to know about James Harper. I want to know where he's gone. He's done a disappearing act with that pregnant wife of his. I need to know where he is." "I don't know," said Marcus. "He just up and left. I don't know where he's gone. He never gave me the details. I don't know intimate things like that about my staff." "Where is James Harper?" repeated the man, kicking Marcus in the leg. "You heard me. Where is James Harper? I need to know. You tell me now. Where is he? I want to know." He winced. "I told you. I don't know." The man with the blonde hair began to grow belligerent. He put the revolver against Marcus's temple. "I can pull the trigger if you don't cooperate with me. It would be an awful shame to never see our family again, would it not? That lovely wife of yours is going to have her 40th birthday party this weekend. Wouldn't it be a dreadful pity to have your corpse delivered to her front door as a birthday present?" "You wouldn't," gasped Marcus. I will do whatever it takes, Marcus, to find James Harper. If it means killing you, then so be it. If it means killing your wife, then I will do it. But if you want to get away with a breath in your lungs and a ticking heart, then you better start talking, and talking now. I have no intention of killing you, but if you don't cooperate, I will be forced to pull the trigger. We wouldn't want that, would we? Start talking. Look, I don't know anything. All I know is that they were going to West Virginia to stay at a cottage on a friend's farm. I think it was called Honeybrook Farm. I think the cottage was called Windy Willow. I'm not sure. That's all I know. Now can I go? The man with the blonde hair handed him a burner phone. Call your wife. Tell her something's come up, that you've gone away for the weekend on business. You better be convincing, or I'll shoot you dead. I don't want the police sniffing around, or I'll kill you. Do you understand that? Marcus nodded. He dialed his wife's phone number. Hello? Hello, Diane. It's me, Marcus. Where the hell have you been? I've been worried sick. You've been gone for hours. Your cell phone just goes to voicemail. I've been worried out of my mind. I'm fine, honey. Calm down. I got caught up in a meeting at work that went on for longer than intended. But that's not like you. You don't do stuff like this. You never work late. This is an exception, honey. I don't know how to say this to you, but I'm going to be away for a few days. I'll be away for your 40th birthday on Sunday. Something's come up that's terribly important. I can't give it a miss. You've got to be kidding, Marcus. What's so important that you'd forget my 40th birthday? The whole idea is for us to be celebrating it together. I can't believe you're doing this to me. This is so unlike you. What is so important? What's more important than my birthday? Something highly confidential, sweetheart. I would not miss your birthday for the world if I could avoid it. But I have to do this. It is incredibly important. Trust me on this. What could be that important? I don't understand. This is so unlike you, Marcus. What the heck is going on? You're making no sense. I've got to go. Sorry, sweetheart. The man with the blonde hair snatched the phone from Marcus. That's enough, he said. You've told your wife what she needs to know. She's not happy, said Marcus. You heard her. She smells a rat. I'm sorry, Marcus. It's too bad. I want to tell you I don't enjoy doing this to you. In fact, I've got a very difficult boss who is making my life a living hell. I don't have a choice in the matter. Now there's food there, and drink, and a couple of novels for you to read to keep you entertained, he said, uncuffing the man's hands and tying his foot to a chain which he attached to a metal pole. You can scream as much as you like here, but I assure you no one will hear you, so I wouldn't bother. He said this knowing full well that his parents would only be returning to the property on Monday morning, by which time he would drive the man to another location and set him free. Right now things were going according to plan. All he needed to do was to notify the big boss, who wanted to accompany him on this mission. They would be booking their flights to West Virginia and trying their damnedest to locate this farm and find the cottage on it. For Joe Bloomberg liked nothing better than annihilating anyone who tried dodging paying him, as he took it personally if a client tried to do a runner. He was looking forward to blowing off James Harper's head. It was part of the job that brought him a measure of satisfaction. He loved the pleasure of provoking fear among all those who knew him. He loved his reputation. It was a beautiful, blissful Saturday morning in West Virginia, but I woke with a direful feeling that literally hung around me all day. It was a foreboding, menacious experience that I couldn't shift. It seemed to travel directly to my baby in my womb, as she began to kick much harder than usual in my belly, as if she too could experience my angst. Worse still, the unfavourable morning sickness that had plagued me in Seattle had returned with a vengeance. It was a nauseous, bodeful feeling that engulfed the back of my throat with a bitter taste. I found myself throwing up violently in the toilet. The entire morning I was hurling up the putrid, bitter contents of my stomach, until finally I could hurl no more. I knew that my gut had a mind of its own. It sensed that something was off. It was like an irrational, intuitive sense of knowing. Don't be silly, I told myself. You're overreacting. You're just having a bad day. Everyone's entitled to a slightly off day, that's all it is. I tried to push that continuous internal gloomy nudge that was whispering to me that something wasn't right, but I refused to give those thoughts any credence. When I was feeling a little bit better and more settled in my stomach, I visited Hetty for a cup of tea, while her husband had been helping Clive on the farm. Hetty made an unusual comment that really got my attention. "You look a bit off colour today, Sasha," she said. "You're having a bad day, are you?" I'd nodded. "I'm afraid I've been throwing up most of the morning." "There must be something in the air. I saw the old man this morning. He looked exceedingly agitated. I haven't seen him like that for a long time." "By the old man, I take it you're talking about Heath, the Bigfoot." "Oh, I am indeed. Heath is a very sensitive creature. You know, he's very intuitive. He can sense things. I could see he seemed rather tense about something this morning. I remember he was like that hours before we had one of those horrendous storms that hit Virginia very hard when 2 of our trees were struck by lightning. Heath sensed it, you know." "Wow, that is incredible. Do you interact with Heath closely?" "Not really. He's quite an evasive creature, really. He keeps himself to himself. But I always know when he's stressed out. He comes up to the farmhouse and looks at me through the window, gives me a nod. I know then he is feeling a little on edge about something, as if he sensed something bad is about to happen." "That makes 2 of us," I said. "I've been feeling an ominous feeling all morning." Hetty looked worried. "You don't think that debt collector has got wind of where you're staying?" she asked. "How could he?" I said. "We didn't tell anyone where we were going." "Are you absolutely sure about that?" asked Hetty. "Very sure," I said, not feeling totally confident, because you can never be sure about anything when you're keeping a low profile. That night as I went to bed and closed the drapes of our bedroom windows, I couldn't shake the fraught nail-biting feeling that weighed so heavily in my gut, like cement. Even the baby in my womb had sensed my level of distress all day. She had been kicking non-stop. "It's all right," I whispered to her. "It's all right, Sienna. Everything's going to be fine." My husband was already asleep in bed when I climbed in next to him. In the past he would have been the one that was wide awake. Now it was me that could not sleep. It was me that was restless. My husband's highly physical job meant that by the end of the day, when his head hit the pillow, he was out like a light. He was now sleeping like a baby. I smiled contentedly to myself when I heard his soft snores. It always pleased me. I began to read an exciting book, but even that could not hold my attention. I knew that sleep had eluded me this evening. I was wide awake, feeling agitated, as if I was on tenterhooks all the time. That was when I decided a brisk walk was well in order. It would help me unwind a little, I thought. I surreptitiously crept outside the house so as not to disturb my husband, and I began to take a gentle stroll. I was so glad I did. A full moon infused the velvety sky in a bright effusive light that was warm and engaging, while clusters of pretty stars twinkled like diamonds in the vast firmament, while the chorus of crickets and frogs serenaded the night in a joyful, reassuring ambience that calmed the nerves. I trekked through the tall, imposing trees of the wood grove, thoroughly enjoying the feel of the earthen floor under my feet, the cool breeze blowing against my skin. It was invigorating and refreshing. The trees swayed their large boughs in the breeze, clustered together in congenial groups, like tall solitary strangers that had decided to swagger to the music of the night, like reluctant dancers at a party. For a second I stood very still. I sensed something was watching me. I was sure of it. My eyes darted towards the solid tree trunk to my left-hand side. My eyes focusing on the tree trunk. It moved. That was then I realized that the tree trunk was actually Heath, the Bigfoot. For a moment our eyes met. I could see him so clearly in the vivid light of the moon that danced through the trees, highlighting the creature's kindly face. I knew I didn't have to be afraid, as Hetty assured me he was benevolent, but I could see that in his eyes. He was very large, at about 8 foot tall, and 700 pounds. He was built like a burly piece of formidable farm machinery, covered in long flowing hair. The creature looked remarkably human close up. I would say the only thing that set him apart from the average human being was his gargantuan proportions, the cone-shaped head and overlong arms. I nodded at Heath. He watched me as I strolled back to the cottage, ambling through the trees. I almost felt as if he was shadowing me, to be certain I was all right. I sensed his protective energy towards me. It wasn't audibly articulated, but I could definitely perceive it. The creature cared about me, as much as he cared about the trees in the woodgrove. As I made my approach towards the cottage, a light was visibly on inside the bedroom. I stopped dead in my tracks. There was something terribly wrong. That light should not be on. My husband was supposed to be asleep. That was when I heard men's raised voices. "You thought you could get away with not paying me, sonny boy. You thought you could run from me. That doesn't happen on my watch. I always find the runaways. You know what happens to anyone who betrays me? Do you know about my reputation?" I told you I'd get you the money," came my husband's terrified voice. I just need time. That's why I went away, because you weren't giving me time. But I was going to pay you back. I promise. It's just you wanted it back too soon. I will raise the money for you. I promise you I will." "You think I'm going to sit around waiting for you to pay me back? No, that's not going to happen, sonny boy. I need to make an example of you, as I do with anyone who betrays me, because I have a reputation to keep up." I could hear them kicking my husband hard as he cried out in dismay, "Please, please, please stop. Don't. It hurts. Don't. You're hurting me." I knew what I needed to do. I ran into the woodgrove. "Heath! Heath! Heath!" I called. It seemed like the Bigfoot knew his name, because he glided towards me. His eyes studied the expression on my face. He knew something was up. He sensed I was in grievous trouble. He briskly followed me. We both stood in the tree line, remaining still. Heath indicated for me to be as quiet as possible, as he began to assimilate what was going on. Hetty was right. He did like to read situations. He was reading the murderous energy of the events unfolding before our eyes. My heart was thundering in my chest as my husband was dragged out of the house by two men, one who was pointing a gun at his back. I could sense these two men meant business. "Move over to that tree, sonny boy," came a man's thunderous voice. He began to kick my husband in the shins. "Oh, you're hurting me! You're hurting me! Please stop!" "Get down on your hands and knees," he demanded. "Over there by that tree. Put your hands on your head." My husband obeyed. He was physically trembling. His eyes were screaming with terror, even though he wasn't saying anything. I could see it. "I want you to beg for your life." I could see a blonde-haired man that disguised his face with a scarf, holding up a cell phone, recording the events. I felt sick to my stomach. I mean, how macabre could you get? I imagine he was recording things to show any potential moneylenders what happens to people who betray their trust. I knew without a shadow of a doubt that they were about to kill my husband, about to end his life. "Please," came my husband's voice, "I will do anything. I have a pregnant wife. We have a baby on the way. She needs me. My baby needs a father. Look, I will do anything. I will raise the money for you. I will even double it if I have to. But please, please don't hurt me." "Beg for your life," the man commanded. "I'm begging you. I'm begging you. Please, I'm begging you." Tears began to stream down my husband's face, while the gun was pinned to the back of his head. "Please," begged my husband. "Please, I'm begging you. Don't kill me. I'm begging you." All of a sudden, Heath glided through the trees. He'd had more than enough. He'd seen more than enough. He moved like a steam engine on full throttle, causing such a commotion on his approach that even the ground began to heave and groan under his weight, while the branches of the trees seemed to snap. Leaves rustled. Both men, whose focus had been on James, were now distracted. They realized something hellishly big, something portentous and threatening, was looming towards them. They both sensed and felt danger. They tasted its rancid, unsavoury taste as a rapid adrenal response coursed through their veins. "What the hell is that?" said Joe, looking at Chris for answers. The young man looked shaken. "God only knows," he whispered, his trembling voice unable to disguise the sense of dread that overcame him. Then they saw the creature, standing yards away from them. Nothing prepared them for what they were seeing. This was the most dreadful, terrifying, gargantuan creature that they had ever seen in their lives. It was a Bigfoot. This creature was not friendly. The Bigfoot growled fiercely, exposing his large white teeth to the two men. They became unhinged, disorientated, as if they'd been hit with 1,000 jolts of electricity, as if they had been momentarily stunned. It was like they froze in terror, incapacitated by fear, their eyes growing wide with horror. "Shoot him! Shoot him!" cried the young man with blonde hair to his boss, Joel Bloomberg. But Joel seemed locked in a stupefied trance. He seemed unable to react. The large Bigfoot grabbed the revolver from the man, throwing it to the trees. Joel began thrashing around, fighting back with all his might. But he was no match for Heath. "Help! Help!" he screamed. But no one came to his aid. No one showed Joel any mercy. For no, he had never shown mercy to anyone a day in his life. And now that he desperately needed it, it evaded him. In a trice, Heath grabbed Joel by the legs, so he was hanging precariously upside down, still screaming at the top of his lungs, "Help me! Somebody help me! Help me!" Heath began pounding him against the tree so violently hard. The screaming subsided, as Joel, after a couple of hefty blows, became very quiet. The life was thrust out of him with every violent blow. His body became limp and unresponsive. Heath dropped the man on the ground. He landed in a bedraggled, lifeless heap. Then the man with the blonde hair was running away, while Heath glided after him, grabbing the screaming man in his hands, tossing him up in the air like an orca tosses baby seals above his head before he devours them. Heath kept catching the young man several times in his hands like a ball, as if toying with him to teach him a lesson that he was unlikely to ever forget. Then Heath let go of the young man, enabling him to escape, because he sensed there was good in this bad apple that was worth preserving. But he continued to chase him nevertheless, until the engine of a truck was heard starting up, as the man drove swiftly away at one hell of a speed. To cut a long story short, Cliff and Hetty discarded the remains of the dead loan shark on a random road in West Virginia, where they knew his body would be recovered by the authorities. James and I were now free to live our lives without the threat of that insidious loan shark Joel Bloomberg on our backs. So we returned safely to Seattle to resume our lives. I'm glad to say that Marcus Sutcliffe was released from his imprisonment in the barn. He was able to attend his wife's 40th birthday, as the blonde man returned to his parents' barn to set him free, apologising profusely for what he'd done, exclaiming that Joel Bloomberg had threatened his life, and he'd done what he'd done to save himself. But now he was free from the shackles of such an evil man. Marcus was no worse for wear, was unable to put down the gripping novel he was reading, even after he was released. It was some novel, I gather. Marcus chose not to report the incident to the police. He had empathy on the youth, who promised to change his ways. 2 months later I gave birth to a beautiful girl that I chose to call Sienna Rose, and both Cliff and Hetty are now her godparents, even though they're a lot older. But we keep in touch. I'm forever grateful to the Bigfoot Heath who saved my husband's skin that night. I know without a shadow of a doubt, without his intervention, my husband would surely be dead. I'm glad to say my husband has a deep aversion to all gambling nowadays, and he even refuses to play the lottery. So there you are. That's my story.
Dear Sarah, and all your lovely listeners, when you're a student, money can be a big contentious issue in your life, unless you're fortunate enough to have wealthy, affluent parents who are generous in assisting you with your finances. Then you are indeed one of the lucky ones. My abstemious, puritanical parents were wealthy, but they weren't generous with their money. They were naturally frugal in every regard. The kind of people that watched every penny, always used coupons and special offers to buy their groceries when it wasn't necessary for them. But my parents loved saving, as every saving was a jackpot win to them. In a nutshell, they were quintessential cheapskates. In the same way that a person might get a rush from riding a roller coaster, my prudent parents got a buzz from saving money. My mother once bought 500 loo rolls because they were half price. She was literally orgasmic about her purchase, and I'm not joking either.
"Oh my God, I can't believe it! I got these loo rolls at half price!" she said, purring in delight like an excitable cat, her voice raised in a jubilant high pitch. "They were half price! I've got 500 of them!" I would watch my father dashing out to his truck to have a look at the loo rolls in the trunk. I remember watching them through the kitchen window. My father's eyes widened with excitement as he gave my mother a high five. I'd never seen two people so enamoured and euphoric by a purchase of loo rolls. To a casual observer, they most certainly looked like two people who had won a lot of money from a day at the Derby. In their mind's eye, they most certainly had. My father eagerly raced into the house, his heart pounding excitedly, his fingers trembling with urgent anticipation, as he vigorously began to tap away at his calculator to work out the thrifty saving that he'd made from the purchase of loo rolls. "We've saved $8 on a pack of 24 loo rolls!" He began to jump up and down like an exuberant puppy. "We're saving an absolute fortune," he had chuckled. "We need to buy more. This saving is huge." Both my parents had dashed to the car in a heightened, excited frenzy, like rambunctious dogs that had been promised a spectacular walk, only to return with 1,000 more loo rolls. I mean, who does that? My parents, that's who. Those loo rolls took up a huge amount of space in our home, but my parents didn't care. They'd got a fantastic bargain, and at the end of the day, that was all that mattered. My mother once learnt of an illustrious bakery that threw out some of its perfectly good baked goods at the end of the day in a dumpster. She'd go dumpster diving in the evening, returning with a huge smile on her face, along with dirty smudges everywhere, and filthy jeans covered in unmentionable muck that smelt positively dicey. "Oh my God!" she explained. "Look, I got these chocolate brownies. You know, the ones with the caramel. Oh my word, they're so delicious, so tasty. Can you believe it? They actually threw these out. And I got those green macaroons. Nothing wrong with these at all. Completely free. Custard tarts. Oh my word. And pecan nut pie donuts. To think I didn't have to pay a penny for any of this." I found my parents' bizarre, incongruous behaviour, although endearing, somewhat embarrassing, especially in supermarket queues when they would hold up the entire line, searching for their coupons in purses and wallets. In those times, I would rather be anywhere else in the world than with my parents. "Wait a moment! Hold on there!" my mother would say. "I definitely got a coupon for peanut butter. I know I have. Just wait a moment." Sometimes she would empty out her entire bag on the counter, scrabbling through the lipstick, purse, makeup mirror, and all kinds of other odds and ends, in earnest hot pursuit for the coupon. "I know I've got it somewhere here. Oh, here it is. I found it," she would cry excitedly. "That's a $7 saving. $7. Invariably, someone at the back of the queue would say, "Get a move on, woman. We're all waiting. You're holding us up. Stop being so selfish." My parents were definitely the kind of people that would die leaving behind a sizable gold mine for their children, that they never got to enjoy themselves. But then maybe that's not really true. Maybe I'm wrong about that. For my parents got a thrill from saving money. That brought them immeasurable joy. So each to his own. After I'd left school, I wanted a year off for myself. I was fatigued from years of studying. I wanted a break. I was ambivalent, hemming and hawing in a quandary of what I actually wanted to do with my life. I needed some precious and valuable time to reflect on this perturbing question, rather than diving into the deep end and tackling a career path that was very wrong for me. I envied many of my unhesitant friends that did not vacillate like I did, but seemed resolute and unwavering in their aspirations for their lives, what degrees they needed to acquire, what path they needed to take. It would seem that they had diligently resolved and cemented their life paths like an assiduous builder, laying down firm, solid foundations for themselves that would not be susceptible to crumbling or falling apart. Most of them were going to the University of Colorado. For me, I was standing at the crossroads, looking at several forks in the road, not confident about travelling down any of them. My feet were hesitant, my mind changeable, temperamental, very fickle. Much like the changing seasons, my resolve unaffirmed. That was when my friend Sophia mentioned to me that her grandmother was going to Britain to stay with her sister for 6 months. She'd been asked to stay in her Gram's remote cabin to look after her Jack Russell Terrier Maddie, who she claimed under no circumstances could ever be placed in kennels. It would make the dog far too distraught. She was very particular about her Jack Russell, and was desirous for her granddaughter to watch over the little dog. My overbearing mother is insistent. I should stay in the remote cabin in the middle of nowhere, she was telling me. I mean, can you believe it? She thinks I should take a whole year off. My grandmother has given me so much during my life, paying for all my extracurricular activities and school fees, so she feels I owe her big time. But look at me. I'm a social bunny. I love to party, to hang around with my friends. Can you imagine me sticking out a remote cabin for 6 months? I'll be tearing my hair out. I'll be bored out of my skull. But does my mother understand? Not a chance. She's laying down the pressure on me. She's already telling my Grams I'll do it. My Grammy is paying big bucks for me to stay there, but I don't want to do it. Well, what are you going to do? I'd asked, knowing from my own personal experience how persuasive forceful parents are inclined to be. It's very difficult to say no to them. I'm going to surreptitiously find someone else to live there for me, while I live in town with Angelica. They don't need to know about it. The question is, who am I going to find willing to spend 6 months in a remote cabin for me? I'll give them Grammy's money to make it worth their while. Hopefully that will be an attractive lure for them. I'll do it, I said, the words slipping out so hastily. I hadn't time to comprehend what I was actually saying. Sophia looked at me cynically, her eyes growing round in surprise. Is this some kind of a wind-up, Jennifer? Or are you being deadly serious? No, I'm being serious. It might suit me down to the ground. I haven't decided what I actually want to do with my life. I'm not like you. I'm not organised in that area. I was planning to take a year off, just to reflect on things, to find out where I want to go. I could do with the money as well, but a quiet place will give me a chance to meditate, to take stock, to make some wise decisions. I need time. I'm very indecisive. It's possibly because I'm a Libra. Well, that's what I've been told anyway. You're a funny one, laughed Sophia. I can't stand quiet, tranquil places. I like to be around the vibrant hustle and bustle of a busy, flamboyant town. Now, are you sure you want to do this, Jennifer? I need you to commit to this 100%. I'm being deadly serious now. I'm not playing any games here. You can't just up and leave when the going gets tough or because you don't like it anymore. You can't let me down. Do you understand? I need your commitment. I nodded. I won't up and leave. You can rely on me. I enjoy my own company. I appreciate the tranquility. But much like every city dweller, I do have 2 concerns. Running water that's hot, electricity, and Wi-Fi connections. Done. She has all of those, Sophia assured me. She's only 15 minutes from Boulder in Colorado, so it's a very efficient cabin. It's got everything you need. I wasn't sure that I was completely stark raving mad to be undertaking this crazy project of looking after a Jack Russell Terrier in a remote rustic cabin in a solitary place, but I had nothing better to do with my time. I couldn't face spending a year at home watching my parents get intoxicated over reduced prices in honey and oatmeal hair shampoo or in Tide washing detergent. So I made haste my escape, packing my bag, taking along with me my big fat black tabby called Chester for the ride. I loved having him around. He had a lazy, laid-back, lackadaisical disposition that was highly infectious, as seeing him at ease with the world made me naturally relax, as pets have that extraordinary capability of soothing and easing your angst, better than any calming medication or even long soaks in a hot bath. Chester had been a rescue kitten. I'd discovered him fortuitously when I noticed a tied-up shopping bag moving on the side of the road when I was driving off the interstate. The moving bag had demanded my attention, as it struck me as very odd. Was something snagged up in it, I wondered? I pulled over the side of the road and opened the bag to find a frantic kitten caught up inside it. I was appalled that someone had tossed out the bag out of the truck window and left poor Chester to suffocate. I found Chester, and he found me. It was a serendipitous affair, and we had been good for each other ever since. In truth, I don't think Chester forgot that I'd rescued him from that evil intent of a clearly vindictive person who had no regard for his little precious life whatsoever. I noticed that he had always been afraid of the sound of rusting plastic bags, which would make perfect sense to me. I mean, could you blame him? Sophia had assured me that her grandmother's Jack Russell Maddie was well used to cats, as her grandmother had raised him with 2 elderly cats that had since passed away. He had been very attached to the creatures. I knew I had to be very careful, as some Jack Russells can be aggressive towards cats. After dropping in at the pretty town of Boulder, situated at the foothills of the Rocky Mountains, at about 5,430 feet above sea level, it is known as one of the best places in America to live for quality of life. It's home to people eager to retire, fitness enthusiasts, along with a plethora of organic goods to purchase for health food junkies, of which there are many in Boulder. I went up there to pick up some food supplies for myself. I'm glad to say I'm not a health food junkie. Life is way too short to get frenzied about food. I also picked up a plethora of dog and cat food supplies, along with some firewood, but I needn't have bothered because I was to find that the cabin was well stocked. I put some petrol in my truck and eagerly made my way to the cabin. I was used to living in the city of Denver, so living in a quiet place like this was going to take a major amount of adjustment for me. But I was looking forward to embracing a whole new experience. It would be an adventure, one of which I approached wholeheartedly, with a fervent enthusiasm. In truth, I got hopelessly lost finding the place, even with my GPS, as it kept losing connection. But finally I found a small country road that led to an open cattle gate, with a sign that read Moonlight Ridge Country Cabin. I breathed a huge sigh of relief. I was finally here, thank goodness. I could hear Chester meowing in the cat basket in the back. Perhaps he sensed by the way I was driving we were nearing our destination. The road to the cabin was an obstacle course in itself, very wobbly, as rocks were scattered precariously over the dirt road. I was jolting all over the place on my approach, but as I neared the cabin I audibly gasped. It was breathtakingly beautiful. I could actually get why someone would want to live in a remote place like this. The endearing rustic cabin was made from old timber beams, very ancient. This wasn't a new cabin, which added to its charm and nostalgic appeal. It was steeped in history, as every timber beam had soaked up the vibrant energy of people from bygone times, when a horse and cart would have been the only mode of transportation. Fortunately, it had been fitted with electricity. There was a bathroom addition to the rear, so that the old outhouse that had once been a separate toilet was being used for firewood storage. The cabin seamlessly blended into the environment, as if it belonged to the valley, like every tree, every blade of grass, every flower in the meadow. It had been built on a white gravel clearing, where a few terracotta plant pots had been bountifully filled with colourful, showy, flowery displays of pink, purple and red geraniums, purple petunias and blue lobelia. Beyond the gravel was a long ribbon of neatly mown grass, hemmed in by a pristinely manicured hedge. But beyond its outer borders and perimeters was a natural flowery meadow, bespeckled with wild flowers of every colour and variety, that swayed so graciously in the wind. There were occasional rocky outcrops, along with a plethora of trees that on the right-hand side sprawled out into a vast wood grove. In the furthest distance you could see the distinguished rise and fall of the commanding mountains that surrendered themselves under the cobalt blue sky, rather like portly men with sizable girths, that were so gargantuan they couldn't move a muscle, so stood perfectly still, basking in the glorious bright congenial sunshine of a new day. I parked my truck on the gravel driveway. As soon as I made my way to the cabin door, I could hear the delighted yelps of the terrier, who welcomed me profusely. Maddie immediately sensed Chester there in the cat box. She became very excited and enamoured. I was initially apprehensive about the two animals' interaction together, but I shouldn't have been worried at all. They bonded instantaneously. It seemed Maddie was rather smitten and in awe of Chester. She seemed to have a huge, remarkable respect for cats, which is unusual for Jack Russell Terriers, but in her case she had grown up with cats. For the first weeks things were uneventful in the cabin. I blended irreproachably into my new life, learning a lot about myself in the process. I realised I relished my own company, along with being up close and personal to the natural world. I was seemingly enchanted by the bird life, butterflies, squirrels, deer, and bedazzling views. I had been getting up reasonably early every morning, going for long leisurely walks in the wood grove, accompanied by the very excitable little Maddie, who smelt every blade of grass, every fern, every briar, with a joyous gusto, lifting up her leg to anoint every available tree trunk with her fragrant doggy spray, to tell all and sundry that were interested that Maddie had been there. It was at night, when I was seated in front of the television set with my remote control, that I did become increasingly nervous and on edge. I was mindfully aware that I was all on my own. But then that did not matter, did it? I mean, this wasn't a city with gangland shootings and drunken brawls. This was the countryside. All that was out there was mountain lions, coyotes and foxes that would likely give the cabin a wide berth. I managed to successfully talk myself into a state of calm, with Maddie sleeping peacefully by my feet, while Chester curled up on my lap. That was when I heard the ominous sound of pebbles outside the cabin, being crunched beneath heavy bipedal feet. It sounded like a human being was walking around the cabin, and whoever they were had substantial footfall. It didn't sound as if they were an animal out there. They could only be human with a guileful intent, I thought. The horrifying revelation hit me like a brick to the head. I could sense and feel danger. The hairs on the back of my neck were prickling and standing on edge. Maddie began to growl. I pushed Chester off my lap, creeping ever so slowly and quietly towards the window. I stealthily pulled back the curtain to look out of the glass pane. Something obscure was standing there, staring in at me with a bright red eye shine, at about 8 foot off the ground. The silhouette was portentous, so terrifying. I let out a huge, terrified scream. Then this creature, whatever it was, made haste to escape. I could see its dense, tenebrous silhouette running away. Whatever it was very sizable. I immediately dialed the police in Boulder. "Please come at once. There's been an intruder on the property." I had been assured that they would be along shortly. When the familiar police truck with its flashing blue light pulled up to the driveway, I was never more relieved. An officer climbed out of the truck, slamming the door behind him, and surveying the night with his discerning eyes, with the keenness of an owl. Then I heard the knock at my door. I opened it quickly, audibly sighing in relief. Something was here a moment ago, officer. I don't know exactly what it was, but it was looking in at me. It was huge, very, very big. It ran away. It looked human. It had a menacing red eye shine." "I'm Officer Terence Scott. I'm pleased to make your acquaintance. And you are?" "My name's Katrina Hilton," I told him. "I'm staying here in Mrs. Dottie Penbrook's cabin, while she's away in England with her sister for 6 months. "I see, so you're a city girl, then?" "That's right. I'm from Denver." "I thought as much. You looked like a city girl. So you're staying out here all on your own, are you?" he said, stroking his moustache reflectively. "I ask you, is that a very good idea?" "Isn't it safer here than the city?" I protested. "Of course it's safer than the city," said Officer Scott. "But what you must appreciate is that the country is very different to the city. You can hear sounds at night that might just scare you, simply because you're not used to them. Some animals can make screaming sounds that sound like someone is being murdered. It can be very unsettling and disturbing for a person not acquainted with country life. You may have heard an animal last night or even tonight. The thing that you thought you saw, it might have been a fox or a raccoon just loitering around. It's easy to make your imagination play tricks on you. At night, lots of animals give an eye shine that seems very intimidating, but it's to do with their night vision capabilities." "No, officer, you don't understand. It was looking in at me, whatever it was, standing on 2 feet. It was very big, with red eyes. It stared at me through the window, then it ran away." The officer raised his brow quizzically. "I do have to ask you this, ma'am, so please don't take any offence by it. But have you been drinking tonight, or taking any recreational narcotics?" "Absolutely not, officer. I'm not delusional. I know what I saw. I didn't drink alcohol. I don't take drugs." I could see Officer Scott looking at me with a measure of scepticism. He had seen city girls like me before, with the propensity to overreact. I assume he thought I'd mistaken the humanoid form I'd discerned as an animal, highly exaggerating its size, but I knew what I'd seen. I watched him going through the motions, examining the immediate area around my cabin, which was completely fruitless, as whatever it was that had been looking in at me had long since absconded. I realised that calling the police out had been a fruitless exercise. I'm sure he considered me a neurotic city girl with a hyped-up imagination that was guilty of watching too many horror movies and filling my head with crazy ideas. I was interpreting every noise in the wilderness as some portentous, dangerous thing. In truth, when I saw the officer Scott leave, I was heartily relieved to see the back of him. Instead of offering me a measure of reassurance, he'd made me feel like a naive, bundling idiot who had lost leave of my senses and was a silly little girl crying wolf. Granted, I did not know much about the country, nor the strange sounds of the night beyond the chorus of crickets and frogs, but I wasn't a complete dithering fool. I knew I'd seen something that had been standing on 2 feet, but now my sense of reason had been vacuum-suctioned away by the officer's sagacious sense of reason, and probable rational explanations that he offered up to me, to explain away the strange curious noises I'd heard, along with the menacing red eyeshine that had looked in at me. Indeed, he was so masterfully persuasive that I was seriously beginning to doubt myself. Maybe he was right after all. Maybe it was an animal that I'd seen. It could have been a black bear, standing up on its hind legs, I told myself, even though I had vividly remembered the human-like face that had looked in at me. But I deleted those vivid memories from my mind. Maybe it was my way of settling my frayed nerves, calming myself down. I decided that in the light of the new morning the following day, I would almost certainly do some exploring, to try and find some much-needed answers for myself. The very next day I arose early, and went investigating the woodgrove curiously with Maddie at my side leading the way, with a wagging, very expressive tail, in its appreciation of the woods. It was evident that this little rambunctious ball of energy knew her way around the woodgrove terribly well. She was having an exuberant time, putting her nose in everything, savouring the cocktail of rich smells she encountered along the way. It did give me pause for thought, as I contemplated what it must be like to zealously explore the world through your nose. The vast array of varying scents, from the floral to the woody, to the acidic markers from animals. What little Maddie was smelling was telling a story. Maddie definitely knew it all, but I was very limited, confined to my meagre, insubstantial eyesight, to only what I could physically see with my eyes. Having said that, what I was beholding did not feel restricted at all, as the woodgrove was spectacular. I was transfixed by the mesmerising beauty of the trees, so tall, so proud, so statuesque, like graceful dancers that rose up graciously into the sky, covered in bountiful boughs of verdant needles. Then there was a forest earthen floor, dappled with beguiling lacy ferns, pretty green shrubbery, as well as a plethora of velvety green moss. The trees congregated together tightly, but with a bounteous amount of space between them. I was able to enjoy walking through them, shaded by the fabulous canopy above my head, that allowed faint slivers of glorious sunbeams to twinkle brightly through the branches, to swathe the floor with soft infusions of beguiling light that was gentle and ethereal. The forest was blissfully alive, vibrant, animated, fully engaged with tuneful bird-song. But although I could hear the birds in the trees, I didn't see them. As I was trekking through the grove, the music of the forest receded, as if someone had switched off the background noise very suddenly. Then I noticed little Maddie darting towards me. She dived between my legs to take cover, as if she was terribly afraid of something. If you're well acquainted with Jack Russell Terriers, you will know their natural demeanour is to be a fearless furball. But Maddie was cowering under my legs, behaving in a way that was very unsettling, very distressing. I knew at once that something had seriously troubled her, but what it was, I couldn't imagine. That was when shivers started pulsating down my spine like bright sparks of vibrant electricity, as if every cell of my body was being physically jolted, stunned and shocked. I was overwhelmed with this incredible sense of knowing I was being watched. I could feel an inauspicious, sizable presence around me. I felt certain that a predator was in my midst. Was it a bear? A mountain lion? A coyote, I wondered? I reached out for a stick as a rather clumsy form of protection, I know, but it symbolized safety for me. It gave me a false sense of security. Yet, in truth, what kind of protection would a flimsy little stick offer me, and Maddie for that matter? Not much, I am most sure. My anxious eyes surveyed every area of the woods gingerly, looking for any signs of movement, but I saw nothing. Yet I could feel a portentous presence around me the whole time. It was as if eyes were drilling into me like a woodpecker digging into a tree trunk. Maddie continued to remain locked in a fearful repose, her dark eyes fixed on a particular spot. So I focused in the same direction where she was looking, but I saw nothing. "Come, Maddie, let's go," I said. That was when I saw some needles on a ponderosa pine tree swaggering, but there was no wind. So why were the branches moving, I wondered. It must be a squirrel, I thought, but then the branches of another tree began to swagger and shake. I became fearful. I turned around to run with Maddie trailing behind me. She was very clingy, making a fearful whimpering sound. The little Jack Russell was absolutely petrified, affirming my very worst fears, that something was definitely there, and whatever it was, it had to be dangerous. I was certain of that. As I was running, I could hear those footsteps behind me, but these footsteps were definitely bipedal, but they were heavy and very weighty. I stopped for a moment, and whoever and whatever was following me stopped at the same time. But then my attention was directed elsewhere. My blood grew icy cold, as lying across the forest floor was a deceased man. I could see the blood trail running down his face, his glazed eyes staring vacantly into space. I screamed. Then I heard a mighty crash as I saw the big creature thrashing through the trees, standing yards away from me. One look at this creature terrified the living daylights out of me. It was over 9 foot tall, easily 800 pounds, possibly more, 3 foot wide across the chest area, monstrously huge, built, and excuse the expression, like a brick shithouse. It was gargantuan. The creature started to grunt. It looked at me through deep-set dark eyes that seemed benevolent, but that must be a ruse, I thought. I hightailed it out of the woods as quickly as I could, with Maddie following behind me. I ran so fast, gulping the air in large, desperate mouthfuls, while my heart began to thrash violently in my chest. My legs seemed to grow springs like a rabbit, as I bounded back to the cabin, locking and bolting the doors behind me as quickly as I could. I dashed around the cabin in a frantic frenzy, looking through all the windows to see if I could see any signs of the strange creature, but I saw nothing. It didn't appear to have followed me. Chester, who was lying across the sofa stretched out happily, looked up in bewilderment to see my bizarre behaviour. If he had been human, he would have said, "What the hell has got into you? You have ants in your pants. Get a grip, girl." I began to dial the police, but in my desperate hurry, I kept pressing the wrong digits. That's what you do when you're nervous. Finally, I did get through to the police. "Can I speak to Terence Scott? It's very important." "Hold on a moment," came a woman's voice. "I'm putting you through now." "Officer Terence Scott speaking. How may I help you?" "Officer Scott, it's Katrina Hilton speaking. You were at the cabin last night when I reported an intruder. Do you remember that?" "Yes, I remember. Is everything all right with you?" "Not really, officer. Someone's been murdered in the woodgrove. I saw the perpetrator myself." There was a silence at the end of the phone. For a second, almost as if Officer Terence was digesting exactly what I was saying. "I'll be around in a moment," he said. His words seemed to harbour a cynical edge. I wasn't surprised when he came alone in his police truck, without any backup, but that all swiftly changed when he found the deceased, murdered body. Before long, the place was lined up with crime scene tape. Several police officers hovered around the place like buzzing bees over a can of sugary cola, while a coroner clad in biohazard gear visited the scene. Then the body was covered with a body bag and taken to the morgue for an autopsy. It was hauntingly surreal to realise that someone had been murdered so close to my cabin. It left an uneasiness transcending over my gut, making me feel distinctly queasy and off colour. The sheriff came into the cubicle to have a few words with me at the station. As I was naturally taken there, after this had all transpired. He was an agreeable, congenial man in his early 60s, with a white moustache, white hair, and piercing blue eyes. He took off his cowboy hat and put it down by his side on the large walnut desk. "Are you all right?" he asked me. His eyes looked concerned. "Can I get you a drink or something? It must have been a terrible shock for you to encounter that dead body in the woods. If you need to speak to a trauma counsellor, it can be arranged for you." "I'm fine," I assured him. "It was a big shock. I'm not going to kid, but I'll get over it." "Officer Scott tells me you called him last night to the cabin. He said that you were very convinced you'd heard someone walking around the premises." "I did, Sheriff. I was very scared. That's why I called the police. I promise you my dog was growling, and my cat was visibly upset." "Well, did you see anything?" "As it happens, I did. There was a human-like face staring at me in the window." "Did you get a good look at the face?" "Well, it was vague, but I knew it must be the perpetrator of the murder. I saw him this morning. He was following me and my dog in the wood green, standing very close to the deceased body." "So you think the murderer was loitering around long after the crime? I mean, the body looks like it's been deceased for over 24 hours. It would be exceedingly unlikely for a murderer to be hanging around a deceased corpse. You think he's interested in you as well, is that what you're saying?" "Oh, definitely, Sheriff. Or why would he go around my cabin in the middle of the night? Why would he be looking in at me in the window?" "What I'd like you to do, Katrina, is to go to the police artist, give a description of the perpetrator to him. Do you think you can do that for me? It would be most appreciated." I nodded. "Of course, Sheriff," I said. "I'll do anything I can to help." I was led into a cubicle where a man called Shane was going to draw a picture of what I'd seen. He had his pencil and paper at the ready. "So explain what the man looked like," he said to me. "Well, he looked like a man, if you know what I mean, but he wasn't exactly." The police artist nibbled the end of his pencil uneasily. He visibly stiffened. His brows crinkled, and furrows developed between them. "Sorry, Katrina. That's your name, is it not?" I nodded. "If you don't mind my saying, you're not exactly making any sense. What do you mean he wasn't a man, exactly?" "Well, he was very tall, 9 feet. The police artist raised a sceptical eyebrow, as if for a moment he thought he was talking to a whack job who was making everything up as she went along for maximum attention. "Did you say 9 foot?" "Yes, very hefty. His whole body was covered in hair. He looked human, but he had a cone-shaped head, deep-set dark eyes, and a leathery face." The police artist tapped into his phone. He then showed me a picture of the Patterson footage of a Bigfoot. At that time I didn't know what a Bigfoot was. "Do you think it looked a little like this?" he asked me. I nodded. "Yes, but bigger, slimmer, a lot heavier and much more hair. The face was also a lot more human." "You don't know what that is?" he asked me. "No, I don't." "That's a Bigfoot. You must have seen a Bigfoot. It's a humanoid creature covered in hair. There's one big problem here, Katrina." "Yes," I said, looking incredulous. "What?" "Well, the Bigfoot could not have committed this murder that you claim he did. The deceased body was covered in multiple gunshot wounds." "But," I stammered, "it was standing near the dead body. It was watching me. It was following me. That happened this morning. The previous night, it was peeking in at the window at me. It was walking around my cabin. I'm certain it was that was walking around my cabin, because it was making a very loud commotion, and this thing is very heavy." "Well, maybe it was curious, inquisitive," said the police artist. He looked at me. "Look, I believe your story, Katrina. I don't think you're making any of this up. But there are people around here that will think you're completely kooky if you start talking about a Bigfoot like this. If you want my advice, I'd shut up if I was you. I wouldn't say a word to anyone about this. Look, I will tell the police on your behalf that your mind went blank. You couldn't remember a thing. You couldn't remember what the perpetrator looked like. After all, you don't. We established you didn't see the murderer at all. You just saw a Bigfoot." "Thanks. I so appreciate your discretion, Shane. I do feel a bit like an idiot, a real fool. But the trouble is I don't know about Bigfoots. I have sort of heard about the creature before, but I haven't really discussed it much. Of course you don't know about it, said Shane. Living in a city means you're not exposed to discussions about Bigfoot. But there are people who think Bigfoot is a mythical beast, so if I were you, I'd keep my zipper shut. When I arrived back at the cabin, I wasn't sure how safe I felt, knowing that a man had been shot in the woods, and there was a Bigfoot loitering around. I was in two minds of what I should do. I had given my solemn word to Sophia that I would stay at the log cabin for 6 months, but surely these were exceptional, extenuating circumstances, considering a dead body had been found in the woodgrove that wasn't very far from the cabin. As I was dishing out some cat food on a plate for Chester, who had been meowing to be fed, my gaze landed on a letter addressed to Sophia from her grandmother that said, "To Sophia, instructions while I'm away." It dawned on me that I was filling in for Sophia, so the letter was really meant for me, not for her. It read, "My dearest darling Sophia, I cannot tell you how grateful I am to you, my love, that you're looking after Maddie for me. She's a very special little dog. I know she'll be exceedingly safe in your charge. I also understand that being out in the countryside, after you're used to the vibrant buzz and excitement of the city, will be a great adjustment for you. But I truly appreciate the sacrifice you are making on my account. Do not forget that I do realize this. But it pleases me greatly to know that Maddie is in such brilliant hands. You have always been so good with her. I feel I'd better warn you that your presence on my property might arouse the curiosity of a Bigfoot that I call Big Boots. I assure you he's a benevolent little creature, well, large creature, who's very comical. You might find him peeking in at the cabin at night, or secretly watching you when you go walking with Maddie. He might even follow you around, as he does with me. He's done that for over 20 years now. I've grown fond of him. Maddie is very intimidated by him. He scares her. But don't be afraid of him, my dear. He will do you no harm at all. In truth, you're probably a lot safer with him around. I hope this time of getting up and close and personal with nature will make you consider the wonders of the natural world. They really are quite marvellous, dear. After you've spent a long time in my cabin, I think you will begin to realise and understand why I have made this place my home. Your loving Grammy. I could hardly believe the contents of the letter. There was me falsely accusing the Bigfoot of the murder, when all the time he was innocent. The only thing he could really be accused of was being intimidating in both weight and size, and also being ultra-nosy, which is hardly the crime of the century. It would explain that all the noises I was hearing at night were all down to an inquisitive Bigfoot. Still, there was one mystery that remained unanswered and unsolved. Who was the dead man in the woodgrove? Why had he been shot multiple times? Little did I know that the answers would soon be forthcoming by Officer Scott, who popped around to see me to enlighten me on the case. I came around to tell you about the dead man found in the woods. It's not normally police protocol to talk about the victim like this, and why he was shot. But the sheriff thinks it's a good idea you know what's going on in these extenuating circumstances. You have the right to know what happened to him. I really appreciate that, officer. I would like to know. Of course you would. Do you mind if I sit down? Of course, Officer Scott. Mind my manners, please, I said, inviting him into the cabin, offering him the large upholstered chair in the living room. He sat down gratefully. Can I get you some coffee? That would be very nice. Milk with 1 sugar, please. I watched as Officer Scott grabbed his coffee, took a large swig. You never get over a murder ever in the force. It's always sad, you know, that the person lying there deceased is someone's loved one. The worst part is informing the loved ones left behind that their son, their brother or husband is deceased, especially when it's so nonsensical in the way that he died. I nodded. Well, it can't be easy for you, can it? I imagine your job must be pretty tough. Was the deceased married? Thankfully not, said Officer Scott, taking another swig of coffee. This is good stuff. So did you find out who murdered him and why? Oh, yes. His name was Hugh, by all accounts. This wasn't a difficult case to solve at all. With those gunshots, we all knew the crime was personal. When someone continues to shoot a person long after they're dead, you know that the perpetrator is very angry. He's expressing his rage, So you look at the person's immediate circle to find out who might have upset the man enough to end up taking his life. It's not too hard to find answers, to pick up guilty body language. The moment I met Hugh's best friend, he was so distraught. I suspected him at once of the murder. He wasn't behaving right. When we brought him in for questioning, he was a nervous wreck, twitching anxiously. His leg was constantly thumping up and down under the chair. He tried desperately to avoid direct eye contact with any of us. We knew immediately he was hiding something, so we had to get him to talk. We won over his trust, gave him donuts and Coca-Cola. Finally, he buckled under the intense scrutiny, confessed to the crime, admitted to shooting his best friend several times in a moment of incandescent rage that had accumulated over a day or so. Of course, in the aftermath of the tragedy, he was exceedingly remorseful, rarely regrets what he's done, because by all accounts he's lost a very good friend. But what could be so bad that he would kill his friend like that? The perpetrator's name is Rupert. He shot his friend over a lottery ticket, would you believe? He got his friend Hugh to purchase his regular ticket with the usual numbers on the payslip. I gather he's been using these special numbers that are unique to him week after week, month after month, year after year without fail. His best friend knew the numbers, was well acquainted with them, and went to get him the ticket. Then they discovered he'd won over $10 million on the lottery, which Rupert discovered was a sizable fortune. Of course, his friend insisted they split the winnings in half, each getting $5 million. Hugh explained to him it was only fair that he got half the money, as he was the one that had purchased the ticket. Rupert didn't think this was reasonable. A huge fight ensued that resulted in a physical altercation. Rupert wanted to give his friend $100,000 for his trouble, but that was that. That was where he drew the line. In the end, he played along with his friend, telling him he would give him half the money, that he would give him $5 million. But he didn't really mean it. He suggested they take a walk on an unused hiking trail, which was here on the property, to discuss the $5 million that they were each going to get. He happened to know the place very well, that Woodgrove. It was a ruse so he could shoot his friend, as he had no intention of giving him a single penny. I gasped. That's terrible. The love of money can do the strangest things to people, and the nicest people too. But I do know what it's like. My parents have a quirky relationship with money themselves. They get excited over any savings they make, even though they have a sizable bank account. Officer Scott laughed. Money can be the root of all evil, if greed's involved. It can make people do outrageous things. I'm sure now that I've told you what happened, you'll feel a lot safer out here, knowing that no one is loitering in the woods, and that the perpetrator has been arrested. Thanks for telling me, officer. I really appreciate it. Needless to say, I did stay on in the cabin for the required length of time, and was regularly shadowed by Boots the Bigfoot, who would often peek in at me through the window. I would get random sightings of him, but he always remained in the shadows. But I knew in the end that he was indeed a benign, benevolent fellow. So there you are. That's my story. Dear Sarah, and all your lovely listeners, it had only been 2 weekends ago when I'd watched over my little nephew playing with his Lego blocks, and then his stunning little building came crashing down as every single Lego block came tumbling to the ground in a dishevelled heap. His whole little creation had fallen apart. He began to howl with disappointment, the tears pouring down his desperately sad cheeks. "It's broken," he cried. "The house I made is broken." I gathered him into my arms reassuringly. "It's all right, Monty. It's not the end of the world. You can build another one, just as good as the first one." He looked at me through wide, earnest eyes and tear-stained cheeks. "But Auntie Lisa, you don't understand. I like this one the way it was. I can never get it the same again." I looked at my adorable nephew and smiled. "Of course you can," I said encouragingly. "You can begin again. Your new creation will be better than the last one. I can promise you of that." Little did I realise how symbolic those shattered Lego blocks would become in my own life. It would seem in a matter of days the very same thing had happened to me, as my life came crashing down like a house that had been demolished. Now I was tormented with exactly the same words that I'd spoken to my nephew 2 weeks prior. "You can begin again. Your new creation can be better than last time." What an idiot I was, as I knew with a profound certainty that it would never really be that easy, as the emotional scars can leave an indelible imprint on your life that isn't easy to wash away by any manner of means. I was staring at my life with the same feeling of hopeless despondency that my nephew had experienced when he'd been staring so despairingly at his Lego blocks. Was this the universe's way of making me eat my own words? If it was, it wasn't funny. I wasn't laughing. Who knew that life could be so heartless, so cruel, so unkind? The first brick to come tumbling down from my building was my boyfriend Adam, who told me that we needed to talk. It was those inauspicious, ominous words that literally had resounded alarm bells ringing in my head. He stood there in the kitchen, refusing to look directly at me, his eyes remaining fixated on the floor, as though something on the ground was a source of great fascination and intrigue to him. My heart began thundering violently in my chest, and the unfavourable, pretentious burning pit in my stomach was beginning to do somersaults. I could sense what was coming up, but I never knew it would be so brutal, that it would hit me so violently hard in the face like a brick. "I'd like you to leave my apartment," he promptly stated. "I'd like you to leave right now." "But I don't understand." "I like you, Lisa. I rarely do. But I have fallen for someone else. It's not easy to tell you this, nor to lead you on, but I have to be very honest. I know things have been good between us, but there is no spark left anymore." I felt as if someone had dumped an ice-cold bucket of water on my head. I didn't have to ask Adam who he'd fallen for. I already knew the answer to that question. I had been an unfortunate witness to his amorous glances at a young woman at a friend's barbecue over the weekend. I'd felt sick to my stomach as I'd seen Adam stealing sideways impassioned glances at her the entire afternoon. He could not have made it more obvious if he'd even tried. I'd seen my friends giving me pitiful, sympathetic looks, as though they felt sorry for me, as my boyfriend was not subtle in his hankering after another woman. He was positively drooling over her like a dog over a bone. It had been embarrassing, humiliating. I'd found it desperately unsettling. I knew he fancied this woman, but I never expected to be thrown to the curb like this, in such a despicable, cold-blooded way, like a half-drowned kitten, being tossed, repudiated and scrapped, replaced for something infinitely better. I couldn't understand the attraction, as by all accounts she was a mousy, rather drab-looking woman, with no arresting features to set her apart, nothing so special about her that would stand out to me as particularly beautiful. In truth, without wishing to sound self-appraising or conceited, I considered myself to be infinitely more attractive than she was. But then beauty is in the eye of the beholder, isn't it? If she had possessed a charming personality, I might have appreciated the attraction, but she was as beige and colourless as her appearance. Ostensibly, Adam thought she was absolutely gorgeous. He hadn't been able to stop eyeballing her. That was very clear. In the course of our relationship, he had never looked at me like that, so I almost envied the woman for the attraction that Adam bestowed on her. "It's that girl, isn't it? The one with the brown hair. What's her name? Sally. The one that was at the barbecue this weekend." Adam looked at me in bewilderment. "How do you know?" he stammered. "I guessed," I said soberly. "Everyone at the barbecue knew you had the hots for her. You made it pretty obvious." I felt so humiliated, pathetic, inconspicuous, small, as I gathered my belongings together. It was as if the headmistress at the local school had caught me misbehaving and had expelled me. I could sense I was no longer wanted. I was surplus to requirements. My boyfriend was champing at the bit to get rid of me. I could feel it. The sooner the better as far as he was concerned. He couldn't wait to move the new model in, to replace the old, well-used edition. It was such a hostile, uncongenial feeling. It really plundered my self-esteem and my self-confidence, making me feel as if I'd been run over by a 10-ton truck, or flattened to the ground like a pancake. My emotions felt raw, My eyes filled with tears. I'd really loved Adam, but the fact that he had fallen for someone else made me feel sick to the stomach. It was churning violently. I wondered if he'd been seeing the Sally behind my back. I was almost certain he had, but I couldn't be sure. "I'm sorry, Lisa," he said, distancing himself from me, keeping me at arm's length to avoid any intimate contact, as if I was afflicted with a reprehensible, contagious, deadly disease all of a sudden. He opened the door to let me out. "I hope we can remain friends, Lisa," he said. His words couldn't have sounded more insincere. I could feel his eyes pinned on me as he watched me walking that walk of shame down his driveway, climbing into the Uber taxi that was waiting for me, that he'd called to pick me up. I gave the taxi driver my home address, and then I burst into tears. "Are you all right, love?" asked the taxi driver. "If it's him you're crying about, I wouldn't bother. He looks like a cold fish to me. If you ask me, love, you've had a lucky escape." "But I loved him. I thought we had a future together." The taxi driver chuckled. "When you get to my age, young lady, you learn the true meaning of love. And it's not being treated like the way he's treated you." "He told me he's in love with another girl. The girl he met at the barbecue over the weekend." "Is that so? He's a fast worker, isn't he?" said the taxi driver. "I think you can rest assured, young lady, that he's got a lot of growing up to do, and you don't want to be around for that." He was probably right. Although the taxi driver's words offered me a measure of comfort, I felt terribly alone, hurt and lost, rejected. I made my way back to my parents' home, with my tail between my legs. My childhood residence was a semi-detached home in Lower Manhattan. I could tell my mother was not pleased I was moving back into the house. Her expression revealed her distinct displeasure at my unexpected arrival. On the plus side, my father was delighted I was moving back in, but my mother didn't share his optimistic outlook. "What are you doing back home, sweetheart?" she had said. "I've got nowhere to go," I'd said. "Adam ended things with me." "Oh dear, I am sorry to hear that," said my mother, giving me a stiff hug that couldn't have been more insincere, as there was no warmth in her welcome. I could sense she didn't want me back home. "You're 30 years old, dear," said my mother. "Isn't it time you got a place of your own? You shouldn't be living with your parents." "Don't worry, Mum," I said. "I won't be under your feet for very long. I can promise you of that." "Don't be ridiculous, Claudia," said my father, throwing my mother dagger-like looks. "Lisa can stay with us as long as she wants. She's always welcome here. She's our daughter, for goodness sake. This is her home, and it always shall be that." "She needs to learn," said my mother pointedly, "that she's far too old to be relying on her parents for everything. Look at Mark and Robert. They have successful jobs and homes of their own, and they're not even 30 yet." It was typical. All my life my mother had compared me to my two younger brothers, who were computer whiz kids and had made it big for themselves from a very young age. In my mother's humble opinion, I was almost certainly the black sheep of the family, the embarrassment, the daughter she never wanted to discuss with any of her friends, as my mediocre job in sales was not something worth boasting about, and having her daughter back home was the ultimate form of humiliation for her, as it represented and emphasized to any casual observers that I clearly hadn't made a success of my life, because if indeed I had, what was I doing back home? My mother loved to wear the achievements of her children like a noddy badge on her lapel, that cast her in a favourable, enviable light. My father always had my back. "Don't you worry about your mother, Lisa," he told me. "I'll speak to her for you." It didn't feel good not to be wanted by my mother, in my own childhood home, as isn't that the quintessential place that you should always be made to feel welcome when your life has come crumbling down on you? Shouldn't your parents be there to lift you up when you're down, offering you words of encouragement? Not my mother, of course. To all intensive purposes, I regret to have to say that things got considerably a whole lot worse, as the very next day when I went to work, like the Lego blocks, more of the bricks of my life came tumbling down. I was made redundant from my job, as half the sales team had been laid off. We were told it was nothing personal, but how could it not be? Of course it was. Once again I felt like I'd been kicked in the teeth. I was beginning to feel microscopic, like a nanoscopic little ant, so insignificant, so inconsequential, so minor, as if my very existence didn't matter at all. My sense of self-worth was pulverized like a truck that had been obliterated in a devastating car wreck, whose metal had been mangled beyond recognition. Of course, when my mother learnt that I'd been laid off, she looked like the dog whose nose had been thrust into its own vomit. I remember her face paled, her eyes glazed over. There was a look of unadulterated horror on her face. I think she was petrified that she would be lumbered with me for the foreseeable future. I would be the mortifying consternation in her life, especially if her friends got the revelation of the shameful fact that her less-than-perfect daughter had moved back into the family residential home indefinitely and wasn't moving out any time soon. "Well, you can't stay here indefinitely, Lisa," she said to me. "You better start looking for a job now. You're far too old to be living with us," she insinuated. "You need to learn to stand on your own 2 feet, my dear, just like your brothers have done. You can't expect me and your father to mollycoddle you, can you?" I had wanted to scream, but I had resisted the temptation, while my father had given me sympathetic looks along with a sizable cheque when my mother's back was turned. If my mother had learnt about his generosity, she would have given birth to kittens on the spot. She would have been desperately upset. I had given my father a huge, grateful, warm hug. "I love you, Dad. You're the best father in the world." "That's kind of you to say, Lisa, dear, but I wish I could do a whole lot more for you. I really do. You've taken an awful beating recently, but the good news is that things will only get better." It would seem he was the only one who had my back and cared about helping me get out of the mess that I found myself in. I was fortunate to learn about a charming cottage in a remote area that was going for a low rental cost, with one condition attached, and that was to look after the owner's little Havanese dog. She was going overseas for 6 months to stay with her ailing father. It seemed like this was the quintessential opportunity that I would be crazy to miss. I had decided I would take an online course to gain some extra skills to advance my career. Why not live somewhere in the countryside in the meanwhile? It would be so much more preferable than living in a stuffy apartment block that would cost me an arm and a leg to rent. The isolated remote cottage really was in the middle of nowhere, situated on the edge of an old logging road, built in the middle of a flowering meadow, with breathtaking, awesome distant views of the rising mountains that dappled the furthest horizon in soft greens at the base and blues and purple hues at its highest elevations. All this under a dazzling blue cobalt sky. At the end of the pretty flowering meadow was a dense woodland area that consisted of towering ponderosa pine trees, along with a plethora of hiking trails that were no longer in use. To be fair, the nearest town was about 20 minutes away, but even so it felt incredibly isolated. The cute little sumptuous dwelling oozed character like a dreamy chocolate eclair, and old-world charm like an American old-fashioned apple pie. It was whitewashed, built masterfully from brick and stone, with sash windows, pale blue shutters, and a central front door. The rear of the cottage was warmly hugged, generously embraced by a wraparound porch that overlooked a silvery pond, where weeping willows brushed their verdant boughs over the water's edge, and where a plethora of wild animals would regularly congregate in the late evening for a much-needed drink. My truck had almost missed the narrow turn off to Fairfield Cottage, as the little dirt road had been very obscure. It looked more like a path leading to nowhere, rather than a road, but thankfully I was here now, counting my blessings. The whimsical cottage was so incredibly enchanting, so much better than renting a tiny apartment in town, and much better than I had anticipated. I knew this was a win-win situation, and with all the peace, tranquillity and quiet, I was more than likely to get a lot of studying done here. What could go wrong? I was delighted, of course, by the 2 furry residents, a tiny little joyful dog called Tinker, and a fat marmalade cat called Arthur, who loved to park himself on the sofa, sleeping all day. There is something incredibly relaxing about a furry energy sleeping peacefully on the sofa. The interior of the cottage was warm and congenial, with large open-plan fireplaces and walnut wooden floors, along with a simple but stylish sweeping staircase that led to 3 small bedrooms with ensuite bathrooms, one that had been prepared for me with the finest Egyptian cottons. There was a note from the owner of the cottage with instructions on how to feed the animals, and, of course, details about the nearest town, where to buy my supplies. She appeared to be like a nice woman, who had cleared up the place, stuffing boxes of her stuff into one of the bedrooms. I settled into the cottage seamlessly, thriving on the solitude of the place, still ever grateful to have internet connection and electricity, which meant soaking, relaxing hot baths, scented with orange blossom essential oil or neroli, were always on offer, along with complimentary cosy crackling fires in the late evening, if the temperature dropped significantly. Of course, having been used to the sounds of the city, like the honking taxi cabs, the truck wheels skidding down tarmac, people's voices shouting across the street, it certainly took a great deal of adjustment getting used to acclimatizing to the strange outlandish sounds of the night, which included the crickets chirping, the frogs croaking, the occasional sounds of something howling in the distance, possibly a coyote or a mountain lion, sounds I was not well acquainted with, that I was hoping I was going to get used to. One night the atmosphere in the cottage began to change quite significantly, as little Tinker started to emit a low guttural growl from the back of his throat. His beady brown eyes pinned on a window where I had drawn the curtain. He would sit up, his ears pinned forward. He would continue to growl, and then his growling faded. His body would begin to physically slacken and relax. He would then drift off to sleep again, as if nothing had happened, but his waggling ears seemed to remain alert at all time, as if he was listening out for any peculiar sounds. I also noticed Arthur the cat seemed unnaturally on edge during these times. The fat tabby was interested in food, sleep, and more food. He was so chilled out normally, he wouldn't even bat an eyelid, but he became troubled on these harrowing moments, as if he sensed an unwelcome presence out of doors. This was certainly not the first time this had transpired. Something was definitely outside the cottage, making me mindfully aware of my fragile vulnerability. The nonsensical, irrational way little Tinker was behaving certainly engaged my intuition to a high alert status. I knew something was out there, but what? That was the question. Tinker's steadfast focus was intent on that window. He was a barometer to me of what was going on out of doors, as dogs have finely tuned senses that can perceive things we cannot discern. On this occasion he was twitching nervously, his head was up, his dark eyes wide and alert, his hackles rising. In a trice he jumped off my lap where he'd been lying, running over to the window, and he began to bark furiously, clawing at the curtain with his paws. "Tinker, get down," I scolded, picking up the little dog in my arms that was struggling to get out of my grip. "You're going to ruin those curtains." I put him on the ground. He hightailed it to the kitchen door, scratching furiously like he had done the last 2 successive nights. I had to let him out when he was like this, as I'd been instructed by the owner. The previous night he'd failed to come back for 3 hours. I became frenzied with horrified images in my mind of having to tell Tinker's owner that he'd vanished or something quite catastrophic had happened to him. But when he returned, he came back with his tail between his legs. I was sure he'd learnt his lesson, as he didn't look so eager to leave the confines of the cottage any more. But now he was doing it all over again, scratching to be let out. I opened the door very reluctantly. He ran out into the meadow, barking excitedly, as though running towards a great friend. I sighed warily as I closed the door behind me. The owner had assured me that it was safe for Tinker to run around the meadow at night, but I wasn't so sure she was right. I admit I was a city girl, but surely there were coyotes and foxes running around at night that could potentially harm little Tinker. I was beginning to re-evaluate whether letting Tinker out at night was such a good idea after all, especially if he was gone for so long. I decided to focus on my studying. I'd listen out for the familiar scratching sound at the door that would alert me to the fact that Tinker had returned. I prayed he'd be back soon with all my heart. I didn't like him being out there on his own. As I was working, I was certain I could hear someone walking around the cottage, crunching pebbles beneath bipedal feet. I could hear rustling sounds of leaves. I could feel a chill running down my spine as I recalled all those Home Alone movies. Someone was definitely out there. I was sure of it. My heart began to pound. I sat very still and listened. I darted towards the fireplace, grabbing an iron poker, which I kept by my side, as a makeshift weapon, just in case there was someone loitering around. I diligently went around the entire cottage, inspecting every window and door, making sure that everything was firmly locked. If anyone so much as entered this property, I would whack them over the head with an iron bar, I thought to myself as I visualized myself throttling an intruder. I sat there shivering. I could hear something bumping against the eaves. There was definitely a loud thumping sound as something hit the house so very hard with a loud ominous thud. Oh my God, I thought. Is that Tinker? Has someone thrown him against the cottage? It sounded exactly like that. Then I heard a squeal. I dashed hurriedly over to the kitchen door, my heart pounding, my stomach terrified of what I would ultimately see. I opened the door. The little dog came bounding into the kitchen, his tail tucked between his legs, his black eyes round with terror. It was clear to see something had truly rattled the poor thing. I watched him cowering as he retreated under the kitchen table to hide. He was whimpering, his eyes glued to the door, as if he knew exactly what was out there, and he didn't like it. How I wished I knew what it was. Then I heard what sounded like footsteps walking away from the cottage, crunching pebbles beneath feet. I was certain I'd heard someone cough. Was it my imagination running wild, I wondered? I wasn't used to being in such a remote part of the world like this, listening to all the anomalous sounds of the night that were more than a little discomposing for the uninitiated like myself. In a trice things settled down, as if the cottage itself began to physically breathe and sigh in relaxation. It was a huge relief after the footsteps had finally retreated. As if by magic, the warm energy of the snug cottage reignited, like the flame of a fire. We were now enveloped in a sumptuous warmth. Tinker seemed to physically relax. His tail wagged. He came out of his hiding place, no worse for wear, jumping onto my lap and falling fast asleep, while I caressed his long coat, wondering what it was that had distressed him so much. But like a typical dog, he bounced back with an enviable doggy resilience. Once again, he was in a happy-go-lucky mood. I was beginning to think I was losing my mind. Living in such a tranquil location had made me start to imagine things. The next morning I had a visit from a local lad called Digby, who was a friend of Miss Nicole Blythe, the lady who owned the cottage. I imagined he'd probably been asked to check up on me. Of course I didn't mind, as I wanted her to be reassured that I was indeed taking care of the place. Digby was a young man in his early 30s, possibly a year or so older than I was. He lived in a neighbouring farm and had been friends with Nicole Blythe for many long years. By all accounts, they played bridge together twice a week. "Come in, Digby," I said to him. "It's good to see you. I'll put a kettle on, shall I?" "I brought you some free-range eggs from my chickens, and some locally sourced honey," he said, putting them down on the kitchen counter. "How are things going?" he said, picking up Tinker in his arms, being covered by dozens of affectionate licks. "You don't mind him licking you like a popsicle?" "No, not at all. I love animals. So how are things going around here?" "It's been going well, but I'm not going to kid. Sometimes at night I'm on tenterhooks. For several nights at the same time, Tinker has become very alert, has growled and barked incessantly, as if something is out there. I got quite scared at one point last night. I could swear I heard someone walking around the cottage." "Are you sure it wasn't an animal? A raccoon, perhaps? Maybe a fox?" "It definitely wasn't. It sounded bipedal. It sounded human, as if a human being was walking around our property. It gave me the chills." Digby frowned. "That's not good news. I don't like the sound of that. You being a woman on your own and stuff like that." "I keep thinking it must be my imagination. You see, I'm used to New York, the bustling, busy city, the honking taxicabs. But out here in Northern Carolina, it's different ballgame altogether, isn't it?" "I imagine it is. But if you say you heard a man's footsteps, I don't think you would imagine that. They're very distinctive." He straightened for a moment. "I tell you what, I'm going to walk around the cottage right now. I want you to listen carefully. Tell me if I sound like the noise you heard last night." I listened to Digby, ambling around the cottage. He claimed he was trying to be particularly quiet. The sound was very distinctive, much like the noise I'd heard the previous night. He was right. It did sound human. "It's the same sound," I admitted. "That's not good. Would you feel safer if I stayed here overnight in the spare room?" "I can't ask you to do that, but it's very nice of you to offer." I could see that Digby looked troubled. "Are you all right?" I asked. "You look as white as a sheet." "This is a remote location. I am disturbed by the noise you heard last night. Promise me you'll give me a call if anything happens tonight. You have my mobile phone number. I'll be around here as quickly as I can." "That's very kind of you," I said, feeling heartily relieved and very assured that there was someone not too far away from me that I could call if something untoward were to happen. The following night, the banging around the eaves of the cottage began all over again, as if on cue. Then I heard the feet crunching pebbles, leaves rustling, twigs breaking, something or someone kicking stones. Tinker began to growl. Then he started to bark furiously, while Arthur began to twitch nervously. Something was definitely out there again. Then I heard the banging of my front door. I nearly had a heart attack, jumped out of my skin. Whatever was out there wanted to come in now, and they weren't being subtle about it either. "Lisa, are you in there?" came a familiar voice. It was Digby. I was so relieved. I ran to open the door to him. So happy to hear a familiar voice. "Oh, I'm glad it's you. What are you doing here?" "I couldn't get any sleep tonight. I was lying in bed worrying about what you told me earlier on in the day. It got me very concerned about your welfare. I just thought I had to come over to check up on you." "Were you walking around the cottage before you knocked on the door? I distinctly heard bipedal footsteps." "No, I've only just arrived now. Didn't you hear my truck?" "No, but I definitely heard footsteps walking around the cottage only moments ago." "Wait there, Lisa. I'm going to examine the immediate premises, to see if there are any signs of life, to see if I can spot or see anything." "No, I'm coming with you. Don't leave me on my own." So with headlamps on our heads, we ventured out into the meadow, while Digby used his flashlight to light up any shadowy obscure areas that were shrouded by darkness, having audaciously escaped the prisms of moonlight that dappled the valley in a soft, gentle glow. The first port of call was the pond, of course, but there was no sign of activity anywhere, not even a deer having a drink, until we heard a blood-curdling scream coming from the woodgrove. That got our attention. The scream sounded human. What the hell was that? Digby and I looked at each other in alarm. Someone's in trouble. We ran towards the woodgrove, uncertain of what we would find, driven by our incessant need to help this person who was clearly in perilous trouble. It sounded like they were being murdered, or as if their life was in danger, maliciously being expunged from them. It was instinctive to help this individual. In that moment, neither Digby or myself considered our own safety. I'd never been in the woodgrove before during the day, let alone at night. I was unfamiliar with the area. I had been intending to explore it, but my studies had been piling up, especially after a few harrowing nights when my focus had been directed towards the noises outside my door. It was a dark, tenebrous night, with a scattering of silvery stars and a bright crescent moon. I wish I knew how to put it into words, but it felt as if something was seriously off. The trees themselves clustered together, tall and proud in bushy groups, looking like armed bandits conspiring against us in haughty whispers. Their tall, dense silhouettes seemed dark and menacing, and every time their needled boughs swayed in the twilight, it looked ominously like something shadowy was moving by stealth through the trees. On this evening I'd become like little Tinker, who was not happy to be confined to the cottage. My senses were heightened. I felt as if I was alert to every single sound in the woodgrove. Digby and I cautiously made our way through the trees. Then we heard the screams again. The sound was getting very close. "Do it, bro!" I heard a commanding voice saying, "Go on, you know you can. I'm losing my patience with you." Then the screaming started all over again. Amidst the screams I heard an audible cry for help. "Help me! Someone! Is somebody out there? Can someone help me?" We moved closer, taking cover behind a tree, watching a haunting scene unfold before our eyes, as if we were observing a sinister movie. There was one man tied to a tree with a rope around his middle, and two redneck brothers, one whom was clearly unhinged, based on the conversation we heard. It appeared he wanted his brother to put a bullet into the head of the man he had abducted, and all this over a woman that his brother was attracted to. It appeared that the man being tied up was the young woman's boyfriend. "Do it, bro!" came the commanding voice. "I don't want to. I can't. It's not right. It's morally wrong. Oh, don't be ridiculous, Harper. Let's not go through this all over again and go around in circles. This is the 4th night in a row. I thought you would have grown a backbone by now, but no, you haven't. Don't be such a pussy. You know you can pull the trigger. Isn't that what you want? Then you can have Seneca all to yourself. You can't say I don't do anything for you, bro. You can't say I'm not looking out for your best interests. I can't do it, came the trembling voice. I'm not a killer, bro. I can't do it. If Seneca doesn't want me, that's her call. That's fine by me. I accept that. But please, I beg you, let this man go. I don't understand you, bro. Look what I do for you. You said to me a week ago that you would do anything to go out with Seneca, that you wished you could get rid of the boyfriend who was dating her. I know I said it, but I didn't mean it literally, bro. I was speaking hypothetically. I was saying I fancied Seneca, that I wished she would notice me, that's all, that I wish she didn't have a boyfriend. And she will notice you when you get rid of her boyfriend, when you get him out of the way, bro. Are you going to sit back, looking a gift horse in the mouth? Look what I've done for you. I've gone out of a limb, done you a huge favour. Not many big brothers like me, I can assure you. Now you're throwing it back in my face. For 4 nights I've had to lock you both up in that shed, because you haven't got the balls to put a bullet in his head. It's like you expect me to do all your dirty work for you. You've got to learn to take responsibility, bro. You can't expect your big brother to do everything for you. That's not how it works. I'm trying to teach you to take responsibility. Please, came a desperate voice. Please let me go. I'll end my relationship with Seneca. Then your brother can date her. But please let me go. Please, please don't kill me. What do you take me for? I'm not stupid, mate. 1, I don't believe a word of what you say. 2, I don't think you're going to break up with Seneca for my brother's sake. And 3, I know you'll go tittle-tattling to the police, so I'm not going to set you free. I won't. I promise you I won't. Well, I've had quite enough. It looks like I'm going to have to finish you off myself. If my brother's not going to do it, I will have to put a bullet through your head. I'm going to have to teach you, bro, how to have a backbone, how things are done properly around here. I'll go to the police, bro, if you kill this man. It's not right. You can't do it. You're not right in the head, bro. You need psychiatric help. You really do. You've got problems. You know you haven't been taking your meds. That's why you're behaving all crazy. You know you need to take them, bro. How dare you, Clyde? How dare you talk to me like this? After all I've done for you, this is the thanks I get. What's that? He said suddenly. Listen. All of a sudden we heard a prodigious thundering sound that was so incredibly loud that the whole forest began to shake and wobble precariously, as if a huge charging elephant was rampaging through the woods, storming towards us. I could hear a tree falling down with an almighty crash, as well as branches breaking and snapping. It was the most terrifying sound that I felt as if everything around me was shuddering, like a large vibrating boat on a tempestuous sea. Then I realized that it was me that was wobbling so much, floundering unsteadily in a seesaw-like motion. It was as if everything sensed that something baleful, very foreboding, was moving towards us, and whatever it was, it appeared to be incandescent. I could feel the powerful energy, awesome, masterful presence before I even saw it. Believe me, you can feel it when something substantial is in your midst, even if you don't directly see it at first. I got goosebumps while my hair on my head stood up on end. This thing was monstrous, towering at about 10 foot tall, 4 feet wide across the chest area. It was covered in long flowing dark hair, giving off a very angry vibe that was threatening in every regard, as he began to defiantly pound his chest in a gesture of supreme dominance, unleashing an ear-piercing roar that was loud enough to shatter crystal. The large, mentally disturbed man began to scream, "It's a bloody Bigfoot! Oh, it's a Bigfoot!" Then he unhesitantly pulled back the trigger, not even stopping momentary to consider the repercussions of such a bold, injudicious act. But his actions were stifled and thwarted as the creature ran towards him, bouncing out of the way of the bullets with the agility and grace of a powerful cat. He thrust the revolver out of the man's hands with one powerful swipe. Then he picked it off the ground, throwing it into the undergrowth, where it landed with a thud, somewhere now hidden and submerged by the dense foliage. With overlong arms that were powerful, weighty, that boasted muscles so impressive that even a bodybuilder would be terribly intimidated by them, he grabbed the man, and in a trice plucked his head off his neck, as if it was a cherry from a tree that he was picking. I blinked my eyes twice. Did I really see that, I wondered? No, surely not. But there was no mistaking what I'd just witnessed. The head didn't even look real, but like a large mannequin, as the glazed marble-like eyes stared vacantly into space. It looked so surreal, you could have been forgiven for believing it was some macabre stage prop for a horror movie. The creature kicked the man's head away with his tree-trunk-sized legs like a baseball, and it went flying into the bushes. All became very still, as no one said a single word. The two men stared at the Bigfoot, too gobsmacked to even react, frozen by fear that snaked around their bodies like a rapid deep freeze that was immobilizing, so much so that they couldn't move a muscle. I was so astonished and confounded, I could hardly believe what I was discerning, as fear began to course through my body, like a charging steam train. I wondered whether the other two men were about to meet a similar deadly fate. I gulped the air like a desperate oxygen-starved goldfish, as I waited with bated breath to see the horrors that were about to unfold. I wanted to make my escape, look away even, but I couldn't. It was like I was locked in the suspense of a gripping movie that was so frightful that I should look away, but I just could not. Then what happened was extraordinary, as the Bigfoot's temper subsided, like the final bit of water running out of a plug hole. The creature physically relaxed. Its stiffened tight shoulders visibly slackened, while his puffed-up chest deflated like a beach ball. The former outraged, inflamed expression in the eyes died like the light on a flickering candle wick, and his clenched-up fingers released themselves from their fixed punch-like hold. The creature scratched his head, not as if he was satisfying an itch that needed his attention, but more as an afterthought, as if the creature was engaging in meditative thought and contemplation. Its deep-set dark eyes seemed to study the two men curiously. He then nodded cordially towards them, and then grunted. His demeanour appeared benevolent and non-threatening. The creature grunted one more time. Then he glided away into the woods, making a similar thunderous commotion as he moved away. But as he ambled through the underbrush, he looked incredibly graceful. So graceful, in fact, it looked as if he was floating. The two men gawked at each other in astonishment, as if they were trying to assimilate the gravity of what had just transpired. "What the hell?" they said, looking at each other in astonishment. "I thought the Bigfoot was going to kill us." Digby and I went darting towards the trees to help untie the man who'd been tied up to the tree, who was so relieved to be set free. To our amazement, the two men hugged each other in relief, as if they knew each other terribly well, and were great friends. We all looked down at the deceased headless body. "I'm sorry about your brother," I said to the young man. "That was quite a grisly-looking death, but if it's any consolation, I think it was quick." "I'm not sad about my brother's death," he told us. "You try living with someone mentally ill when they start refusing their meds. It's like living with Freddy Krueger himself." We were to learn that his brother, whose name was Lewis, was taking antipsychotic medication. He had recently stopped taking his meds, falsely believing he was much better, which is often a problem with mentally ill and disturbed patients. He had been in and out of mental facilities all his life. He'd been recently given the all clear to live a normal life, providing he took his meds religiously. The trouble is, when he failed to take his medication, he became completely erratic and unstable. He'd locked both men in the yard shed at their home. He'd tied them up every night, driving them to the woods. He tried to get his brother Harper to shoot the man who was dating the woman he fancied. He falsely believed he was being a very agreeable big brother, helping his young brother to dispose of his competition. But he emphatically believed his brother was the one that needed to pull the trigger. Over the last few days, the two men had formed an unlikely friendship and become firm friends. but they both knew that unless help arrived very soon, they were more than likely going to end up with a bullet to the head. As Lewis was vacillating in his delusional, fluctuating moods, there was no telling what he might do from one minute to the next. He couldn't be reasoned with. He was very disturbed. "He's not right in the head," Harper, his brother, told us. "These psychotic episodes are getting out of hand. I hate to say it, but I'm relieved he's out of the way. Even my mother said recently he was better off dead. Not to be unkind, but because he's emotionally completely screwed up. He does crazy, nonsensical things when he's off his meds. He put my mother in the freezer box once. If my father hadn't opened up the freezer to get himself some ice cream, she would have frozen to death. He put her in the freezer because she was complaining she was hot. He thought he was doing her a favour. It's a warped way of thinking. I promise you, if that Bigfoot had not come along when he did, I reckon my brother would have killed us both. He is psychotic." We were also to learn that his neurotic brother had been checking out the cottage. The previous night, Tinker had arrived on the scene. His brother had kicked Tinker very, very hard with his boot, which might explain why the dog was in such a terrible state. As for the angry, belligerent Bigfoot, had he perceived that the man was unstable? Had he discerned what was actually going on? I can't be certain, but I believe that may well be the case. I reported the dead body to the police that I claimed to have encountered in the woods, but I never mentioned the Bigfoot had actually killed him. I didn't want to sound like a nutter. I gather they were mystified as to the cause of death, so it remained unexplained on the coroner's report. I am glad to inform you the rest of my stay at the cottage was uneventful, although Digby and I ended up falling in love, something neither of us had anticipated. We are now happily married. Furthermore, Adam, that boyfriend of mine, begged me to take him back, professing his undying love for me. It would seem his infatuation for that mousy girlfriend had been a terrible mistake. He literally moved her in the day after he kicked me out. His illusory fairy tale had come crashing down on him when he realized that the seemingly perfect girl was not so perfect after all. "I can't stand her," he told me. "She has a forked tongue on her. She spouts poison. I really miss you." I didn't forget how he'd unhesitantly thrown me out of his flat in such a humiliating, degrading way. I was not about to rekindle that old flame. I knew he would do it again to me further down the line, as he had a fickle personality. As for my relationship with my mother, it's improved these days significantly when she realized she had a grandchild on the way, which was something she could boast about to her friends, which meant her estimation of me had gone right up, especially when I married a successful farmer. So there you are. That's my story.
Dear Sarah and all your lovely listeners, my name is Ashley, and my Bigfoot encounter happened when I was 27 years old in 2008. By this time in my life, I'd obviously heard about Bigfoot, but I believed that such a creature was just fictitious. I could not believe that something that was not scientifically verified could actually exist. How could it be possible that such a creature could remain in our shadows for so long? And yet there were so many encounters, it all seemed rather bizarre to me, and I'm afraid at the time I was not a believer. I grew up in southern Charleston, West Virginia, which has a rich, vibrant history where Appalachian values run deep. I grew up in an idyllic neighbourhood with my brother Neville and my two parents in a very large, spacious home with exquisite green hills, evergreen lawns, green shrubs and trees. I grew up in a double-storey red-bricked home with a grey roof and white arched windows and large, sumptuous entertainment areas where during the summer we would host delicious barbecues and entertain all our friends. I also adored downtown Charleston itself, as it's a thriving, vibrant metropolitan destination, but with a touch of that small-town flair. Also, there are delicious eateries and amazing places to shop there. And as kids, we loved socialising in the town centre and meeting up with all our friends for homemade ice creams and double thick malt milkshakes. Charleston is nestled in the Kanawha Valley with the canal and Elk rivers meandering through the rolling hills. And yet only an hour outside Charleston you can really go exploring, hiking, fishing or even whitewater rafting. There is so much outdoor adventuring to do there, and as kids my brother Neville and I were in our element. We adored whitewater rafting, exploring, fishing and camping, which we invariably did quite regularly. I left Charleston after I completed my bachelor's degree in fashion design and was offered an amazing job in Los Angeles as an assistant fashion buyer for an upmarket clothes store, where I worked for 2 long years in central Los Angeles. At the time, I lived in a rather small, poky apartment that was so small you could literally swing a cat. My story begins when I decided to take a road trip from California to West Virginia, which would take 4 to 5 days. I was going to my best friend's wedding in West Virginia to be her esteemed maid of honour, so I needed to arrive a day earlier for the wedding. I had not seen my best friend Amanda for over 2 long years, although we did Skype each other very regularly. I had thought about flying out to Virginia at the time, but I decided against it, as I thought it would be infinitely more fun to drive through some enchanting idyllic scenic routes and stop off at different bed and breakfast locations along the way. I enjoyed driving, with one exception of course. I was terrified of driving at night, but I knew if I drove according to my schedules I could avoid that, so I mapped out all the places where I would stop and prepared a great road map for my journey, and I was good to go. As you can imagine, I was so excited about this wedding and returning to my hometown to see my family and friends again and to catch up on all the hometown gossip, as I'd been away so very long. I made sure I packed a sleeping bag, blanket, pillow, flashlight, all the clothes that I would inevitably be needing for my journey, along with a couple of reading books and, of course, food and drink. I left Los Angeles about 9 o'clock in the morning, and after a couple of stops, I drove for about 7 hours straight to the first bed and breakfast where I would be staying. I was greeted by a delightful elderly couple who invited me into their home with such genuine warmth and kindness, and I was beginning to think that I had made a great decision driving instead of flying to West Virginia. I was enjoying the exquisite views and driving through the idyllic North American countryside and meeting such interesting, charming people along the way. It was on the 4th day that things went invariably rather wrong. I left my bed and breakfast at 9 o'clock that morning, very certain that I was going to make good time, but I could not have been more wrong. For the first part of my journey, the heavens opened and it pelted down with rain, and it was so heavy that I barely could see the car in front of me, because the windscreen wipers were not working fast enough to clear the vision for me, which caused me to feel edgy and rather unsettled. Worse still, there was this ominous sound of thunder and flashes of yellow lightning insidiously flashing across the sky, and there was chaotic, disorderly traffic congestion in some of the towns, piling up at an alarming rate. I noticed that despite the weather, people were driving haphazardly on the road and taking risks that they could ill afford to take. Imagine my horror when I noticed a young girl in the car next to me, texting as if her life depended on it, and she was paying no attention to the road while the conditions were invariably becoming exceedingly more treacherous. I remember having a foreboding premonition that something very bad was going to happen, and it would seem that I was not wrong. The girl continued to text, and suddenly she put her foot on the accelerator, ploughing through the heavy rain at an excessive speed, overtaking my vehicle and racing recklessly through a red light, where she had a head-on collision with a massive truck, and in seconds I watched in horror as her car plunged straight into the truck at record speed. There was a thunderous crashing metal sound, and the young girl's car was completely obliterated, and when I use the word obliterated, I frankly quite mean it. It was still pouring down hard with rain, and people's headlights were flashing, and cars were stopping as people sprinted to the scene of carnage, and the entire road was taken up by this horrendous, despicable accident. I remember climbing out of my car in a numbed state, racing over to the accident scene. I observed that the girl's car was so mangled, battered, crumpled and buckled, and the best way I can describe it is that it looked like it had been pressed through a pulverizer or a crushing machine. The crash was unsurvivable, and it was too awful to comprehend. As I was walking back to my car, I skidded over something lying in the road, and to my horror it was the deceased young girl's hand. I was mortified by such a horrifying discovery. I remember that she'd been smoking with one hand out of the window and texting with the other. I mean, how does one ever drive like that, I wondered, and especially in such problematic conditions. It would seem that the ugly scene unfolding before me was so unbelievably surreal. I felt as if I was playing part in an electrically gripping horror movie. Before long, the police and ambulance had arrived, and by then the rain had reduced to a light, gentle trickle. I watched as the EMT put a blanket over the truck driver's back, who they were treating for shock. The poor pale man had eyes as wide as saucers, and he was shaking so much. He kept crying, "I killed her, I killed her." But everybody was comforting him and reassuring him it wasn't his fault. "Dude, she wasn't concentrating. She drove through a red light. It's hardly your fault. Don't blame yourself for this." I sat in my car shaking like a leaf, and my anxiety levels were hitting the roof. A policeman was tapping my window. "Are you all right, ma'am?" he said. "You look shaken up." "I'm fine," I said. "Did you see the accident?" he asked curiously. "Quite terrible. You never get used to them, you know. Been an officer for 20 years now, and never get used to the carnage on our roads." "I saw the whole awful thing," I said. "The young girl was texting on her cell phone and smoking at the very same time, and then she ran through a red light at a record speed. It was like a scene from a horror movie." "Silly girl," said the policeman. "Why do they never learn about this texting malarkey? You mark my words, it's more deadly than drink." "And what for, I ask you? A silly little message on Twitter? What a senseless waste, and life can be so brutal." It was a long time before the traffic could actually get moving, and so I put on some relaxing music to calm down my frayed, fragile nerves and began to make steady progress. But it was growing exceedingly dark, and I'd only managed 5 hours on the road. I was intending to drive for 7.5 hours to get to my bed and breakfast, but I'm too skittish to drive in the dark, because I always feel like I'm seeing double. I knew that I did not have much time to lose, and I looked around for somewhere decent to stay, but the only place I could invariably find was in a remote area, looked rather like a seedy motel. In that moment I decided it would just have to do, as there was no way I was going to drive in the dark, and after witnessing that deadly accident I was exceedingly skittish, so I knew I could do with a good night's sleep. As I entered the lobby there was a tall willowy man standing behind the counter, and he surreptitiously gave me the once-over, as if he was marking me out of 10 for my appearance, which sent warning chills racing down my spine. "I'd like a single room for the night," I said. "I have an ID and a card." "No, I only accept cash," he said. Fortunately, I had enough cash on me, and I paid him in full, and then he gave me a key to room 515, pointing to the open back door in the lobby. "Just go through that door," he said. "The room you're looking for is down the passage." I thanked the man and grabbed the key. I could see it was getting dark, and I was relieved to have a place to stay, although it did look remarkably like the Norman Bates motel. The man who was the psychotic killer who had that fixation with his mother. Remember the one in that movie? Well, this motel enveloped my senses with a similar menacing, inauspicious vibe that had my hair standing on edge. I kept telling myself to stop being so ridiculous. It had been a tough day, and I was imagining all kinds of crazy scenarios, which was hardly surprising, given that I'd been an eyewitness to a tragic car accident. Finally I came to the room, opened the door, and was horrified at how seedy the place was. It was not even very clean. I turned over the age-soiled mattress that smelt of stale urine, and I pounded a few times with my fist, but to be greeted by waves of dust that rose in the air like sandstorms in a desert. I was coughing and spluttering from the dust infusion. Switching the light off, I examined the sheets with my torch, and they were inundated with filthy stains. If things couldn't get worse, they invariably did. I checked the bathroom, and it looked so dingy and nasty that I was almost scared I'd catch some deadly disease off the toilet seat. The final straw was when I noticed some roaches scattered all over the floor, including some rat droppings. There was no way I could stay in this dump, I thought. I decided I'd complain at the desk and insist on a better room or my money back. As I made my way back to the lobby area, the back door was open, so I walked in quietly. The man at the reception booth was on the telephone, but his back was turned away from me, and he immediately got my attention because he was talking about me. There is nothing like hearing someone discussing you to get your attention. "Yes, she's in room 515. I do have a copy of the key. I can give it to you. But I do want $300, yes. Yes, she's a looker. Pretty girl, dark hair, petite. I think she ticks all your boxes. Put it this way, you'll be thanking me afterwards." I could hardly believe what I was hearing. Oh my God, I thought, this isn't happening to me. Luckily, all my stuff was in the car, and so I ran stealthily back to my car, jumped on the seat, and hightailed it out of the car park and started up the engine and drove as far away as I could from that God-forsaken motel in the pitch darkness. I was terrified and shaking so much that I must have driven for about 45 minutes straight. I was driving in an area without any cars in sight, passing farmers' fields with rows and rows of corn and the old isolated country barn, but the area was so incredibly quiet that the silence was deafening and very menacing, and I felt very alone, like a little ant in a massive universe, which was a hugely overwhelming and intimidating feeling. I knew I could not drive any further because my nerves were jaded and wearied. Even my eyes were glazing over, starting to see double. Suddenly I came to a very heavily wooded area with a dirt road growing through the woods, and I knew the cover of trees camouflaging my SUV would help me feel safe. I drove my car down the bumpy dirt road through a wooded area where I parked beside a large, majestic-looking oak tree. Feeling exhausted, I climbed into the back of my SUV and got into my sleeping bag and must have fallen asleep almost immediately, as the effects of the day had worn me out and wearied me desperately. Suddenly I was awoken in the middle of the night to being jolted around in the back of my SUV, and my car was shaking and rattling like a can of sweets. I appeared to be moving backwards and forwards. For a second I thought I was actually being towed away by a truck, because it felt exactly like that. I looked out of the back window of the car to see two strapping, buxom-looking bears carrying my car. I could hardly believe it. I peered ever closer, and I could hear the strange chattering sound that sounded like two people engaging in gibberish, which was decidedly odd, because I was sure it was coming from the bears. I wiggled and manoeuvred my body to the front seat of the car and put on my headlights and sounded my horn very loudly. Suddenly my car was wobbled precariously as it hit the ground with a slight bang, bouncing slightly on its tyres. I clearly had startled the bears by blowing the horn so loudly, I thought. I imagined that they didn't realise that there was anyone or anything in the car. On reflection, I'd never known bears capable of moving a car before, although I had actually observed a black bear smashing out the front window of a car with its own paws in a comedy show once. So I knew that they were powerful animals, but being capable of picking up a car, that was a whole nother story. I never knew they were strong enough for that. I opened the door with my canister of bear spray, ready to spray at the unsuspecting critters, when I realised I was staring at 3 Herculean-sized Bigfoot, and certainly not black bears. Now I was certain I had to be dreaming. My first thought was, "You've got to be kidding me." This was not happening, I thought in bewilderment. It was clear that I had not expected to see a Bigfoot, and nor had they anticipated seeing me. For a second we just stared at each other for a very long time. The creatures must have been about 1,000 pounds, 8 foot tall and 4 foot wide, and they were covered in long, loose, shaggy brown hair, and they had very distinctive cone-shaped heads, long human-like faces, and very visible red eye shine. I couldn't believe what I was actually seeing. Suddenly I heard what sounded like warning gunshots, and the creatures just glided away very swiftly into the woods the moment they heard the sounds, and they took 5 feet strides, and they sped away with incredible agility and grace, moving their arms backwards and forwards as if they were marching. It would seem that they moved with such majesty and grace. Suddenly I heard someone tapping at the window of my SUV, and there I saw him, a jovial, plump farmer, looking in at me with a concerned look on his face. I could see him clearly because my headlights were still on. "Are you all right, missy?" asked the man. I knew something was happening because my farm dogs were barking non-stop, so I thought I'd see what was going on. They didn't scare you, did they? The Bigfoot, I mean. "No," I assured him. "I'm fine." "I'm not sure that you are, miss. You look as white as a sheet. Why don't you follow me back to the farmhouse? The wife will be eager to give you a cup of hot chocolate and a cosy bed to sleep in for the night. I don't like the idea of a young girl like yourself sleeping in your car alone. I couldn't live with myself if anything untoward were to happen to you." Before I knew it, I was actually following this kindly man back to his farmhouse and was being licked to death by his 3 black Labradors, who seemed delighted to meet me. "I'd not have known anything was going on out there," said the farmer, "if it wasn't for these incredible dogs of mine. Their senses are extraordinary." Before long I was being fussed over by a kindly farmer's wife, a lovely lady called Lydia, who presented me with a warm cup of hot chocolate and ushered me into a spare bedroom where I slipped under the cosy, crisp cotton-scented sheets and slept for a very long time. I awoke with the sun dancing through the bedroom windows, and I glanced at my watch and realised it was at least 1 o'clock. I had no idea I'd slept so late. Lydia led me to a bathroom and insisted I had a long soak in a hot bath before lunch. Before long I was sitting around the lunch table eating the most sumptuous home-cooked food, as Lydia was an incredible cook. Before long I began to explain why I'd ended up parking in their woods, and I told them my extraordinary story about the motel, and they suggested I filed a police report, which I of course did. I could not prove anything, as it was all just hearsay. Nevertheless, they took down my details and filed a report. I began to ask the farmer all about the Bigfoot on his land, as I sensed he seemed affiliated with them in some way. He told me that the reason they escorted my car out of the woods because they regarded the wooded area on his property that stretched back for many miles as belonging to them, and my car simply didn't belong in the area. "I'm fine with it," said the farmer. "They keep down the deer population, and I'm grateful for that, and they're never a bother. If you've never seen one before, it can be terrifyingly daunting experience because those critters are massive, and to think they were carrying your car, it never amazes me how strong they are. They never cease to boggle my mind with their extraordinary strength and power." "I can't believe you're talking about them like this," I gasped, because until now I thought they were creatures of fiction. "Well, I'd never dream of telling anybody about the Bigfoot on my land, as I respect their privacy and space, so I tend to keep my mouth shut about such matters, for their own protection, of course. I'm sure most people would do the same in the circumstances. It's a little like they're an extension of your own family, as they tend to grow on you. The last thing I'd want is all and sundry investigating the Bigfoot on my land. They are very private creatures, you know, who hate to be bothered, and if they knew people were coming to check them out, they would leave this place faster than greased lightning, I assure you. I've grown up with Bigfoot, said Ed, all my life. Never been a problem to me or a hindrance either, but more like a marvellous help. They leave piles of firewood for us out in the winter, and in turn they have free access to our vegetable beds and fruit trees. It's all like a little unwritten trade-off, where both parties concerned benefit. Once or twice a year they leave me a big deer carcass of venison and 2 or 3 large turkeys, which is very good of them. They're intelligent creatures, but very territorial, but they help whenever necessary. You see my Labrador dog over there, Missy? That's her name. One day she fell down a mine shaft, and a Bigfoot pulled her out. They're very good like that. My dogs don't mind them either, although you can smell them a mile off. They pong to high heaven. Lydia would love to get them into the bathtub and give them a right old scrub down, wouldn't you, dear? I'd love to, laughed Lydia, but they'd never ever fit. We'd have to get the fire brigade to dig them out, and they wouldn't be happy about that, she chuckled. We all laughed at Lydia's funny joke. Very intelligent creatures with big hearts, continued Farmer Ed. But I do not see them often because they're quite nocturnal and very elusive, always been very shy and reticent. Isn't that right, Lydia? Oh, very shy, said Lydia, and they can hide from you in plain sight and almost disappear in front of your very eyes. Yet when it's picking season with those fruit trees out there, you'll wake up the next morning and they've picked off piles of the fruit that you couldn't reach from the very top branches, so they instinctively help if they sense you're struggling with something. Wow, I said, do you think if someone tried to attack you on your farm that they would actually protect you? In a heartbeat, said Lydia. They would kill the intruder without a second thought. You mark my words. They regard this land as theirs, and in a way they see us as part of the fixture and fittings of this place. So if someone were to harm us, it would be a direct threat to them. You mean like a pussycat, I laughed. Our cat at home rarely believes she owns us, even though we feed her and take care of her all the time. My mother says it's like she rarely believes that she's the boss and we're her property. It's just like that, giggled Lydia. Maybe they think they own us. I decided to spend another night with Lydia and Ed because I didn't want to drive so late in the day, But the following morning I left at first light and made it to my best friend's wedding in time, and was once again reunited with my family members for a very emotional reunion and a very memorable and special wedding where I enjoyed being the maid of honour. As you can imagine, this was a road trip I will never forget in a hurry, and all these years later I often spend holidays with Lydia and Ed, who are now the godparents of my firstborn son, Nathaniel. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention that awful man from the motel is currently serving a 20-year prison sentence, but I'm not sure what he was charged with, but I can only imagine. All I know is that the police wanted me to ID him as the man I heard discussing me on the phone to a customer, as if I was something he was planning to sell. It disgusts me to even think about it today. So there you are. That's my story.
Well, hello there. I hope you enjoyed the Omnibus edition. We've got many more coming our way for you to listen to. Sending you love wherever you are in the world, in North America, Canada, Kenya, wherever you may be. I send you lots and lots of love. Thank you for listening to my Omnibus, and I really do hope you enjoyed it, because that's the whole idea about it, is to give you some interesting stories to listen to. So until next time, goodbye and good night.